Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching.
The director came up with a cunning business, and when one of the girls overheard him talking to a customer, "I'll marry a millionaire and you'll all bite your elbows in envy." With a wave of her hands, Lucy jumped up and started bouncing on the bed as if it were a trampoline, laughing gaily. "How lucky I am! How lucky I am!" Angelica, sitting opposite on the windowsill, sighed. No, she was, of course, very happy for her friend. After all, the life of the future graduate of the orphanage is not sugared to go out all alone in the big world, where you will need to take care of themselves. And here, in fact, such a gift of fate, and for nothing. And yet something did not give Angelica peace. In this orphanage, she spent her whole life since the crimson blanket. The baby was thrown under the gate one snowy December night. And in this orphanage for a couple of years, something extraordinary was going on. The older girls were ready to kiss Director Naomi's hands, who cared for them as if they were her own daughters. She had a kind word for each of them. She was patient and delicate, never shouted, never invented punishments. But the main reason for the adoration of the ruler of this small world was that she helped some girls to settle down well after graduation. Just one day, one of the students, Selena, reported the news. It turns out that the director has relatives abroad who own an international agency that helps young people from disadvantaged families with employment. Imagine, it turns out that a simple waitress can earn at least $1,000 a week, Selena shared with her friends. True, not with all of them. Only with Angelica, Lucy, Ekaterina, and Veronica. It was the director asked not to talk all over the orphanage so that the other guys would not be offended. She herself gave the names of the girls with whom she could share all the plans and even asked Selena to tell them to think about it. Maybe they also want to live normally after graduation. It turned out that the opportunity to get a great job was not rubber, and Valentina, as she said herself, had to make a hard choice and help only some of them. And she made it in favor of, as she said herself, the most talented, promising children. It was them that she recommended to her foreign acquaintances, and they found vacancies. Moreover, the agency undertook all expenses on visa registration, air tickets purchase, as well as provided newcomers with housing, gave an advance payment before the salary. That's how it turned out that as soon as some lucky girl turned 18, she could fly to a bright, as Naomi said, future. And what, just like that from the street, Angelica hummed, even without knowledge of English. She was only 16 at the time of the conversation, the youngest of her friends. "Oh, you always look for minuses in everything." Selena waved her away. "What is there difficult dishes from the menu to memorize? You can learn the language on the spot." "What? Have not heard? There are all sorts of courses where you can learn from scratch in a week." Soon Selena left. She promised to call to write, but it's been almost 2 years. She hasn't sent a single message. Her friends were sad. She'd gotten conceited in her foreign life. After her, several other girls left. But Angelica didn't believe that Selena had forgotten them. That wouldn't be like her at all. Selena had been placed in an orphanage at the age of 12 after losing her parents in a car accident. The only relative who wanted to take care of her was her grandmother, but the guardianship was not granted. The old woman had a stroke. And then another relative had gotten involved, and she, infirm, was placed in a nursing home. And ever since the principal promised to arrange her fate, Selena, as enchanted all day long, has been saying that as soon as she earns more money, she will come back, take her grandmother, pay for her treatment in an expensive private clinic, and they will live happily together. Angelica warmly supported such plans of her friend. She even knew Kathy's grandmother a little bit, and several times she and Selena went to visit her. Angelica once went to Naomi to ask if she could get in touch with Selena, but for some reason the director got nervous and said that it was confidential information, that if the girl wanted to, she would call, right? And then Naomi began to scold Angelica, recalling to her some little things, and ended up kicking her out of the office, telling her to stop filling her head with nonsense. And now it was Lucy's turn. The principal promised her a job in a nightclub as a cook who would prepare desserts for VIP clients. They promised to train her for this profession on the spot. Lucy said, when she stopped laughing and jumping just because she was exhausted, She flew up to her friend and ruffled her hair. Well, think about it. You're the smartest one in the class. You're an honors student. So what? Do you want to go out and work as a saleswoman? And there, you'd hook up with someone too. I don't like it, Angelica said. You know how many stories about how girls are taken abroad and they're forced to do. She looked carefully at her friend. About this agency, nothing on the internet even right. I searched. Not a word. You're like an old woman, suspecting everyone. Lucy grinned. She, like Angelica, had recently turned 18. Unlike her friend, Lucy was an orphan with a living mother and father who had been deprived of her parental rights for drinking and leaving her daughter unattended in a decrepit village house. Lucy hated them and always said she would never forgive them for anything. She also said that being selfish was good and useful in life, and she was very proud of how beautiful she was. Lucy stood out among her friends as a tropical bird, tall, with white porcelain skin studded with golden freckles. By the age of 18, she had a slender, like a reed, but feminine figure. But the main adornment of Lucy was hair fiery red by nature. They curled mane down to the waist. Angelica never envied her beauty, although she could not call herself a beauty. So ordinary, average height, figure is okay, brown hair, and only eyes of a thick green tone. The girl and herself, they liked them for real. Now Angelica was just tired, sitting in the same room with Lucy and having a useless, in fact, conversation. Even her head ached. She was sad that their small friendly company had broken up. After Selena's departure, the connection with Catherine and Veronica was cut off. True, they eventually refused the principal's offer and simply graduated from the orphanage. It seems that Veronica quickly got married, and Ekaterina entered the doctor. I'm going out, Angelica said. She climbed down from the windowsill, picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. It was golden autumn outside. I'll get some fresh air, and went out into the corridor. When it was nasty, Angelica always went deep into the yard, where she had a secret place, an old gazebo covered with ivy. For some reason, the other orphans hardly ever came here, maybe because this place was considered cursed. That was silly, of course, but the inhabitants of the orphanage said that who will sit in it, he will never find a loving, real family. Angelica did not believe in curses and sometimes hid from everyone here with pleasure. But in this twilight hour, when the dining room was about to set the tables for dinner, someone occupied the gazebo. Angelica heard a quiet voice, and then, coming closer, was very surprised to recognize its owner. Naomi was sitting in the gazebo and talking to someone on the phone. The girl wanted to leave quietly, but froze when she heard a strange phrase. Yes, the new girl will soon be ready, but the price should still talk about. Holding her breath and looking under her feet not to inadvertently step on a twig, not to rustle a fallen leaf, the girl crept up and lurked behind a tree. No, you listen to me. Lucy has model parameters, excellent health. I understand, but you also understand I'm taking this risk. You think I don't know how much you make off each one of them? That's how it is. The principal was silent for a few minutes, humming into the phone. You ran a brothel in Belfast, but you promised no one would find out. Oh, so that's why. No, I'm sorry, but I don't mold girls out of dough to supply you with new girls so quickly. Here, take Lucy. She's worth 3. The principal said a few more phrases describing to a gentleman with a long exotic name. What a clever girl Lucy is. Just priceless. What? Are you threatening me? Okay, I get it. I'll try to find someone else, but I want a rush fee. And risk. Okay, yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I do. Angelica froze, nestled against the tree, pressing her cheek against the bark so that it hurt. It seemed that her heart was beating so deafeningly. It seemed that the air disappeared somewhere. The young girl simply could not believe what she had heard. And at the same time, everything was desperate, nightmarishly clear. A man, put in his place in the orphanage to be the support and protection of the children, did terrible things. The principal came out of the gazebo and Angelica squeezed her eyes shut for fear she would notice. She would definitely notice. But Naomi, apparently too immersed in her own thoughts, just passed by. Angelica was shocked. So this was the job the girls were going for. That's why none of the ones who left, Selene. Nausea choked in her throat, and Angelica slapped herself on the cheek to bring herself to her senses. Selena, sweet, gentle, timid Selena. What had become of her? What had become of her? Her thoughts were racing feverishly, hysterically. What if she was rescued? She said that some place had been raided, but logic told Angelica that the chances of that, oh, how small. Who knows where Selena was taken? And Lucy, she's supposed to leave very soon as she gets her passport. Angelica was only 18, but she was not naive and well aware that the people behind the principal of the orphanage are very powerful. How far did they spread their net? Who are they? And how to stop all this? And most importantly, how to save those who can still be saved. In normal life, Angelica did not rush to make decisions, had to weigh everything carefully. But the thought that pierced the mind now seemed the only right. And also absolutely crazy. But the girl had already made up her mind. Immediately after dinner, Angelica came to the door of the principal's office and knocked. "Come in." Naomi was sitting at a massive, expensive desk and going through some papers. Angelica smiled at her. Only to the girl, this smile seemed like the grin of a predatory beast. "Naomi Fedorovna, I need to talk to you." The girl began, embarrassed and timidly. "I've been thinking. It's time for me to leave the orphanage." "Where will I go?" "Well, I'll get an apartment, but it needs so much. And then it would be a good way to study, and I can't afford the budget." The principal nodded. "Sit down, my dear." "Yes, you're right. Your life is not easy." "That's what I thought." Angelica swallowed. She suddenly became afraid that the aunt across from her would smell a lie. As wolves smell a man wounded, grab him. Maybe, if only it is possible, maybe I can work abroad too. I look at Lucy and I envy her. I'm capable and neat, you know that. Angelica made begging eyes and moved forward across the table. "I know English well." "Well, Naomi Fyodorovna, my dear, help me please." "That's how." The principal shook her head. Before the girl came, she was shaking with fear. Because of the fact that the truth might still be revealed. Because of the fact that those who stood above demanded from her goods fresh. As if, excuse me, it's like picking apples from a tree. But now, apparently, luck was again on her side. The principal had had her eye on Angelica for a long time. A pretty face with young features, chubby cheeks, and a neat nose, big eyes. Oh, they loved them there, they say. Naomi went from one side and from the other, but Angelica did not agree. And now look at her, and look how she sang when there was nothing left to do before she left the orphanage. Naomi licked her lips, which were not neatly painted with brick-colored lipstick. 2 girls would be enough to satisfy them. She should probably lay low for a while. "Okay, honey. Don't worry," Naomi turned to Angelica. "We'll make it work. You and Lucy will fly together soon." Angelique spent the next few weeks as if in a dream. It was not difficult to collect a lot of things from the orphanage graduate. The thing was that the girl, having stepped on this path, suddenly became confused. How to organize everything correctly in detail. Angelica spent all her free time on the internet looking for information about what was waiting for her, or rather for her and Lucy. The director said that they would fly to London, and there supposedly they would be met and escorted to the place where they would work and live. But Angelica knew for sure that in fact she would have a minimum of time to do everything she planned, and it would be necessary to act as soon as they arrived. The girl had already considered several options for how to escape. Sharp, bold, and not wandering scared hair, and straight to the local police station. It was not difficult to find the necessary addresses and phone numbers on the internet. Of course, it was impossible to exclude one terrible risk, that there, in Scotland Yard, there are corrupt officials, those who cover gangsters. But Angelica decided she from the threshold of such a noise will raise such a ruckus, will attract public attention. And besides, immediately go to the right police officer. She wrote out the name of a man who, according to reports of the English press, has done a lot to combat human trafficking. He will definitely help. He would have to believe her. Angelica also studied very carefully the plan of the airport and the surrounding streets. In short, the girl hoped that her plan had enough thoughtful details to make it a success. And it can't be otherwise. Angelica was not a fantasist, but here she just couldn't stop the flight of imagination as the English authorities, having received such important information from her, immediately organized a rescue mission, capture the main villain, free the unfortunate captives, and of course, help to find Selena. And then when it's all over, they all return home, that is, to this city, which Angelica happened to consider her hometown. And of course, Naomi will not go unpunished either. She will be destroyed. On the day of departure, Angelica took off her passport cover, lavender-colored, with kittens. The document the girl hid in the lining of her handbag, and in the cover, she simply put blank sheets of paper. She knew from what she had read on the internet, that their passports would be taken away from them immediately, right at the airport. But she'd hoped that in the hustle and bustle, they would just take them away and not look, and then when they realized they had cheated, it would be too late for the villains. "Oh, I'm so worried," smiled Lucy, spinning in front of the mirror. The girl wore her best and favorite red mini dress, as well as golden-heeled sandals. True, it was chilly outside, but Lucy said that for the sake of beauty, one could be a little cold. "Everything will be all right," Angelica said. She was all packed, but she was dressed practically and, most importantly, comfortably for escape, in loose pants and a knitted sweater with a hood. The sweater was gray, but it was double-sided, and if you turned it out, it was green. Angelica was going to do that for disguise as soon as she left the airport. They'll be looking for a brown hair and a gray sweatshirt. Ha! She will be a girl in a green sweater and also a long-haired blonde with glasses. Wig and glasses with simple glasses were already hidden at the bottom of the same handbag. "Believe me, your life will change once and for all," the principal told Angelica as the girls were being picked up by a cab at the gates of the orphanage. Angelica met her gaze. How could anyone be so heartless? After all, Naomi, she herself had a daughter, a teenage girl. In the cab and the airport lounge, Angelica tried not to pay attention to Lucy's chattering about how everything was going to work out great for her. "Hey, did you fall asleep?" Angelica shook her friend's shoulder and the girl woke up. She really had dozed off. It was time to board. They had to get to London with a connection in Berlin. To Germany, the girls had to travel independently, and further, as promised, they were to be met by a man curator who was to take care of them. Sitting in the chair by the window, Angelica thought that perhaps she should have watched more thrillers and detectives in her life. Maybe she would have learned something useful from them. And she also remembered a statement she had once heard that real life was more exciting than any fiction in books and movies. She laughed nervously, and it was impossible not to agree. What she had gotten herself into, it was madness. But Angelica held on, just knew, felt instinctively if she relaxed, let herself worry then, just snapped. We'll panic, and this cannot be allowed in any case. After all, she is now responsible not only for herself, but must save others. "Well, where is he?" asked Lucy unhappily when they, having received the luggage, found themselves in a huge, noisy hall. "I thought they would meet us with this poster." "Oh, they will find it." She waved her hand and pulled her friend by the hand. "Let's go to the cafeteria. There are buns." Angelica nodded. The mysterious curator must have been late, and it was necessary to eat and drink the biggest glass of coffee. The flight fell on the night hours and she, having napped intermittently, felt broken. Lucy and Angelica, right? The girls were sitting at a table when they were distracted from their chocolate snail rolls and coffee by a strong male voice. Angelica looked up. The stranger was prohibitively tall, blonde with correct, but somehow sharp facial features. Black leather jacket. For some reason, this detail of clothing seemed to Angelica the most memorable. It as if concentrated, emphasized all the hidden aggressiveness radiating from the man. "Yes," Lucy answered first. "Are you supposed to meet us?" "Oh, hello." And we were completely frightened. We were lost. She jumped up so that she almost overturned the table. She threw a telling look at her friend. "Look, what a handsome man meets us and also speaks." Angelica was not strong in accents, but for some reason it seemed to her that this man was not European, but maybe from Canada or the USA. "So, you're taking us further," said the girl and took her time buttering the bun. "Good afternoon. There are still 2 hours to our flight." "Change of plans," smirked the stranger. "We're going to Jamaica." Angelica choked on a piece of muffin, coughed, threw another look, now shocked and frightened. "What nonsense? Jamaica when it's supposed to be London." The girl hurriedly sipped her coffee. "Calm down. We can't have him suspecting anything." Lucy was surprised too, but in her own way. At first she asked, "Where is it?" When she heard that the destination was in the Caribbean islands, she shrieked, clapped her hands, and said that she had to go to the store to buy a swimsuit. The man introduced himself as Ethan and said they already had their tickets booked, and it was time to go so as not to miss boarding. "I'll finish it," Angelica said with a deep sense of dignity, and began to spread butter and jam on top of the bun even more slowly than before. "And I'll go. There's still time." The blond man gave her a sizzling look. He clenched his teeth so that his jaws were sharper, but Angelica did not think to cancel her plans. In general, the news took away her appetite. She just desperately wanted to buy a little time to think, or maybe she should run right here. She has absolutely no idea who to address there, on this island of Jamaica, and where to run to too. The plan, thought out with such desperate courage, crumbled like a row of dominoes touched by a snap of the fingers. By the time the scone was eaten and the coffee drunk, Angelica had come to the conclusion that the only solution was to move on. She decided that finding out where the police office in Jamaica was could be done from the phone while they were flying. Lucy, while they were waiting for landing, kept chirping. Ethan answered sparingly, but willy-nilly Angelica managed to find out that he was just over 30 years old, that he was single and had been working in this very praised organization for almost 6 months, and Angelica did not believe a single word, except perhaps for his age. This man was no better than their principal, a lying, cynical monster, supplying innocent souls for the amusement of perverts. And unfortunately, they sat across the aisle on the airplane. Lucy sat next to some obese lady who, despite the fall season, entered the plane in a pineapple dress and a funny straw hat, apparently ready for the tropics. And Angelica's neighbor turned out to be Ethan. The girl mentally cursed. How inconvenient. Now she would have to try to hold the phone so that he would not notice what she was looking at. Finally, the long flight was over. The airport met with the familiar noise. The girls received their luggage, and finally, what Angelica had expected happened. The monster accompanying them said that he needed the girls' passports. Allegedly, there was a sudden need to settle one formality. Angelica took a deep breath and tried to squeeze out a carefree smile. "Of course, here." She held out her document. "I'll leave for a moment. I need to go to the ladies' room." Ethan nodded and told Lucy to wait for him at the kiosk, where they sold all sorts of souvenirs, went somewhere, lost in the crowd. Angelica exhaled huskily and practically ran to the bathroom. 3 minutes, no more than 5. Turn her sweater up. It was chosen for London, and for the local weather was too warm, but it would be strange to go to the toilet with hand luggage. Nervously confusing everything, the girl pulled the wig out of the bag and the door to the stall swung open, just flew off the hook. With a shriek, Angelica stared at Ethan. He was very angry. "Do you want to explain anything?" He waved the paper-filled document cover in the air. Angelica opened and closed her mouth. She was short of breath, and no words came to mind. Grabbing her firmly under the elbow, Ethan yanked the girl up and toward him, pulling her out of the stall. Took the bag away, pulled out his cell phone and tucked it into the pocket of his jeans, and then pulled out the wig. Raising an eyebrow, the man fixed his gaze on Angelica. The girl, her back pressed against the door of another stall, stared at him. She would have screamed, but then he clamped his palm over her mouth. His other hand went down on her neck, fixing her and making her think only of breathing. "Listen to me carefully. Now we're going to walk out of here and you're going to do what I say. Do you understand? No one here can help you. The police are bought. They're gonna bring you back, and they're gonna punish you. Believe me, you don't want to know how. But your friend will be punished first. Now tell me what you're up to." "Lucy." "Lucy has nothing to do with this." Angelica exhaled as he took his hand away from her mouth, clearly expecting a submissive response. "She doesn't know anything. I know why we're here. I want to. I don't want to." "Do you want to or don't you?" Ethan asked snidely, finally removing his hand from her neck. Angelica only now realized that they were alone in this room. "You don't work for anyone," he said thoughtfully and tossed the wig into the trash. Then, as if he had X-ray vision, he simply ripped open the lining of the bag and extracted the real passport. Angelica felt tears coming to her eyes, but she didn't even wipe them away. Wrapping her arms around herself, the girl was shaking like in a fever. Professionals don't behave so idiotically. What did you even expect? I was going to. Please. Let us go. We won't tell anyone. Please. I'm not falling for that. Ethan threw, finally returning the tattered purse. Please, Angelica repeated huffily, doomedly, and sniffled. For the first time since the moment she'd learned what the principal was doing, she was truly afraid. But fear did something good. It gave her the strength to fight. Angelica pretended to obediently leave the room. She walked ahead of the man and suddenly pushed the door back hard. Ethan grunted and grabbed his face. Vindictively hoping she had broken his nose, Angelica rushed out. I don't care what he said. Whoever these criminals were, they couldn't buy everyone, which meant they just had to try a little harder and never give up. Angelica ran without feeling her feet, flying forward, maneuvering between people, pushing whoever needed to be pushed out of the way. Jump! Behind her, there was an empty luggage cart and an airport employee who opened his mouth in surprise. Distantly, the girl thought about the fact that she could probably be detained by security, because it's weird if a person is running. Although maybe she was late for a flight. Finally, the glass doors opened in front of her and Angelica flew out into the cab stand. The hot and humid tropical air hit her in the face. The lush greenery was mixed with the smell of gasoline. Angelica froze. She didn't have any money because she had dropped her purse, dropped it at the door, and now she didn't have her passport either. How to pay for the cab? How do I explain myself to the local authorities? Several drivers, lazily waiting for passengers, were already looking at her with interest. Hi, where are you going? I take the cheapest. A dark-haired, curly-haired guy addressed her in a broken but native language and smiled broadly. Nodding, Angelica rushed to this car and dived into the front seat. Hurry up, please. The guy pushed his sunglasses down on his nose, smiled again, and nodded. Faster than this little girl is not on the island. Abruptly but smoothly he backed up, spun the steering wheel, and drove out of the parking lot. Where to? I don't care. Away from here, Angelica blurted out. The idea that the first thing to do was to go to the police now seemed unforgivably naive and stupid. And what if she was unlucky and met just such a corrupt cop? Maybe they have some kind of department to fight human traffickers. Or should I call the police in a neighboring city instead? Is there a problem? The guy asked me sympathetically. My name is Mark. Angelica. Yes, it's happened. Just you. He waved his hand vaguely in the air. You ran like that. An angry husband? What makes you think so? Angelique was wary. Who else would such a beautiful woman run away from? Mark winked. My sister left her husband. Oh, tortured with him. I had to issue a restraining order. The guy's words gave me hope. Since he had first-hand knowledge of such things, perhaps he could help me, tell me what to do. So where are you going? He asked, when the car stopped at a red light in the dense traffic on one of the central city streets. I'm really in trouble, Angelica said. I'm being stalked by a very bad man. I don't know anyone in this country, and I'm afraid to go to the police. I don't know what to do. And I don't have the money to pay for a cab, she finished quite quietly, nervously rubbing with her finger a nail from which a piece of candy-colored polish had broken off. Wow. The guy wasn't smiling. He was getting serious, thinking hard about something. A foreigner in trouble. Angelica nodded. She wouldn't be surprised if he opened the door now and told her to get out and get out. But instead, the guy suddenly reached for her, his hand dropping to the girl's shoulder. I'll help. Come to my place, okay? And then we'll figure out what to do. Now Angelica could hardly believe her luck. The cab turned down a side street and headed toward the outskirts of the city into the residential and poorest neighborhoods. The cab stopped. Angelica got out and looked around. To the left, two old men were playing dominoes at a table under a funny striped umbrella with the imprinted logo of a famous soda maker. A red-haired dog dozed under the table. To the right, a woman sat on the porch and told a pregnant girl, gesticulating vigorously, who stretched out on her toes, hanging her washed laundry to dry. A flock of kids were racing a soccer ball with a cheerful homonym. Let's go. Mark beckoned Angelica after him and ran up the short stairs and unlocked the door. The girl found herself in a small apartment where everything screamed for renovation. He flashed his white-toothed smile again and went into the kitchen. Angelica sighed and sank down on the sofa. The couch beneath her squeaked pitifully and introduced her heel to several springs. Mark returned with a couple of glasses and a bottle of some kind of drink. Lemonade, non-alcoholic, he explained. Angelica greedily drained the glass, then he poured another. So what's your problem? Should I call your parents or boyfriend? The girl told everything. That she was from an orphanage in a faraway country. That she had a friend at the airport. She told how she ran and hit the blonde monster with the door. You're a dangerous little thing. Mark chuckled and moved closer. His hand went over the back of the couch and down to Angelica's shoulder again. So you're all alone. You know, you need a man to take care of you. His words and body language alerted Angelica. Setting aside the fogged glass of lemonade, she moved to the side. Thanks for the ride. I think since there might be bot police here, I need to go to the next town. I'll go to the authorities there. That's a long way, Mark said. Well, okay, I'll take you in a couple days. What? Angelique almost jumped. No. Please understand, it's urgent. Lucy's left there with him. I can't wait. Well, I've got things to do, Mark shrugged. What's your hurry? Your friend, you say, took the job easily. Perhaps she knew where you were going. Lucy would never. What are you? Saying such things. Angelica was indignant. She was beginning to think that Mark was not the simple, warm-hearted guy he seemed at first glance. But then the keys rustled behind the front door and it opened. Angelica was startled, jumping up. It turned out to be some girl, also dark, with long black hair. She was dressed in a parrot sundress, flip-flops, and with bags in both hands. Oh, she rolled her eyes. I told you to stop bringing your girlfriends to our house. That's my sister, Mark grimaced. Camille, don't start. She's not my girlfriend. This miss was in big trouble and I helped her out. There are bandits out there chasing her. Not ours, not the locals. Who would help you? Snorted Camilla, but she looked at Angelica less hostilely. Foreigner? I'm American, Angelica replied. Your brother saved me. I'm sorry, I'm disturbing you. But I won't be here long. I have to. Oh, not now. The brunette looked up to the ceiling again. I have to cook dinner. Aunt Bella's sick. The last couple of phrases were addressed to Mark. The husband has drunk his paycheck again. Paolo, Ferdy, and Toma are sitting hungry. So please, brother, stay out of my way. You, by the way, turned to Angelica and came over, extending her hand for a handshake. Have dinner with us too, and there you will tell everything. Good deeds are not done on an empty stomach. Angelica had to agree. She believed again that everything would work out. After all, right now she was lucky. After all, these people, having learned that she had big problems, and even of this kind, which involved crime, did not throw her out, and it seems that they were ready to help. Angelica offered her help to Camille, and she, after a little thought, called her into the kitchen and trusted her to cut vegetables and peel shrimp. Soon the rich, spicy flavor of the rice dish, reminiscent of pilau, but with a thick, sour, and sweet gravy, wafted through the small apartment. Mark's sister immediately put most of the food away, repeating that she would take it to the neighbors for dinner. But first they sat down at the table themselves. Mark was taciturn, casting frowning glances at his sister. She seemed to be bothering him. Camilla made a renewed impression on Angelica. She turned out to be a positive and sympathetic girl, though she firmly rejected the idea of going to the police. No. She waved her finger under Angelica's nose. You'll be raked up in no time, and you'll be off to feed the fish. We have to get out of here. Call someone or sell some jewelry. She nodded at her unwilling guest's pendant and earrings. It's costume jewelry, Angelica explained. It cost me $300. I don't understand, Camille said. How much in dollars? Angelique translated roughly. Oh, then really, you better keep it, Mark's sister snorted. You're in for it, girlfriend. But you know what? We'll figure something out. In the meantime, you stay with us, and you, she pointed her fork at her brother. You keep your hands to yourself, okay? You think I can't see what you're thinking? Mark grimaced as if he'd bitten into a lemon, leaned lower over his plate, but nodded in agreement. After dinner, Camilla went out for a while to take food to the neighbors. She came back in a better mood than before, saying she'd already figured something out. My cousin's nephew is in the NCIS, catching poachers. He's a smart guy. I think he'll tell you what to do," Angelica said cheerfully, spreading clean linens on the sofa. "But now he's on shift. Will return the day after tomorrow. Then you'll talk. Until then, you'll stay with us. By the way, I have a friend here on the next street keeps a store. They just need a sales girl. I think you can make a little money for a couple of shifts. But I don't have any papers." "I don't care," Camilla said. "They don't ask questions of their own, and I'll bring you in. Come on, get out. The girls need to change their clothes." She waved her hands at her brother and literally pushed him playfully roughly into the kitchen, closed the door. Walking over to the closet, Camille began to go through things. "Here, pajamas and something else from my closet." She handed Angelica shorts, 2 t-shirts, a dress, and pajamas with dolphins. "Or you'll fry in your warm clothes in our heat. Take it, take it. Don't be shy. Oh, and here you go, samples. You can take the bathroom first. There's shampoo, toothpaste, and a new toothbrush lying around somewhere. Anyway, use it. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to ask." And she gave Angelica a friendly tap on the shoulder. "Thank you." Angelica furtively wiped away the tears. She was amazed that in a foreign country, she suddenly met people who responded to her misfortune. Not rich, very simple. They so generously shared everything they had. After taking a shower and changing for bed, the girl returned to her room. Mark, seeing her, sent a joking air kiss, for which he immediately received a smack from his sister. Angelica did not guess what awaited her tomorrow, only hoped that her luck was not exhausted by today's events and that tomorrow she would be able to move forward a little more, to be one step closer to obtaining freedom for herself, Lucy, and the other prisoners. As soon as Angelica's head touched the pillow, she immediately fell into sleep. In the middle of the night, Angelica jumped up, tangled in the plaid, and almost fell off the couch. She didn't immediately realize what was happening, and then she felt cold at the door, clearly hammered with fists and feet, swearing, and although not a word was understandable, it seems that they spoke in a language like Spanish, breaking clearly were angry. "What happened?" Angelica asked. She, hissed Camille, who was frozen at the door, also sleepy and confused, then turned to her brother. "What the hell is Enrique doing here?" "Sis, I wanted to tell you," Mark muttered, looking at the door, shuddering under the blows with eyes full of horror. "You did pay him back," Camille sort of claimed, but with a grim degree of doubt. "Well, I bought something else. I borrowed it again." Mark coughed and rubbed his forehead. "I'm sorry." "What? Oh, you. Are you sick of living?" Clenching her fists, Camille took a step toward her brother, but then stopped. She looked at Angelica. "So, get in the closet and be quiet as a mouse. What's going on?" Angelica was very scared. The door shook on its hinges under a new series of blows, and those behind it seemed to grow even angrier. Camille looked at Angelica pleadingly. "Do what I'm telling you. Enrique is crazy. He doesn't need to see a white doll like that." Nodding, Angelica did as the girl instructed. Diving into the closet and pressing herself against the back wall, Camilla closed the flaps. It was dark, smelled sweetly of perfume, and a slice of the room could be seen through a crack in the door. Camilla switched to the local language. It seemed to be Spanish after all. From the sounds, she opened the door. A heated, emotional dialogue ensued between the entrance and the host. Then there was a strange sound and something fell. Camilla cried out, and Mark groaned. He opened the door and Angelica obediently climbed in. She felt devastated, exhausted, broken. She just wanted to disappear, or at least not to feel, not to be afraid, not to hear, not to see anything. "Don't go anywhere, okay?" The man smiled and turned back to the gang. And then, coming close to Enrique, he simply punched him in the jaw with all his might. The leader groaned and sank down onto the road, but he did nothing in response. And none of his henchmen moved. They all knew they had the misfortune to accidentally hurt something that belonged to serious people. Ethan was very angry. In fact, he hadn't expected there to be any trouble with these girls. Ever since the plans had suddenly, to be more precise, for everyone but him, suddenly changed, everything had been going right. He had arranged for the goods to be moved to a safe place. It was even funny because the concept of a safe place for Ethan and those he had been working for lately were essentially absolute opposites. It was true that Angelica seemed different to him at first glance, like other girls who'd gotten into the same kind of stories, and he had seen a lot of them. Her friend Lucy, he knew all about her. Nay fool who believed in the fairy tale of a beautiful life. But Angelica made a strange and that irritated, incomprehensible impression. What to expect from her? And then suddenly this prank at the airport. The girl obviously knew why she was taken out. But this masquerade and the paper in the passport cover. What could this little girl, who only recently became an adult, be up to? The mere fact that she consciously took such a risk said that she was impossibly stupid or desperately brave. The only thing that was unclear was her motives. He was going to talk to her and find out, but she surprised again. The blow had been a good one, and now her face was adorned with a band-aid across her nose. Ethan had to stay late to take Lucy to the right place. The girl, by the way, at first worried about her friend, but then she was distracted by her own interests. Ethan told her that Angelica's luggage was found a couple of forbidden things. It was nothing serious, just seeds, but it was forbidden to bring seeds of plants to the islands. And while they would sort out that they were edible seeds and not for sowing, it would take some time. Lucy easily believed the lie. To get on the trail of the fugitive was easy, but still had to distract someone from the business partners. Ethan spent more than an hour feeding these people in advance carefully prepared information, which was far from real, and was able to go after Angelica only at night. And as it turned out, he was in time. The crying, disheveled girl looked very young and defenseless in those pajamas. Every now and then she cast frightened glances at him. Gritting his teeth, Ethan ordered himself to stop feeling sorry for her. He couldn't. It would only make things more difficult. He even tried to tell himself that what had happened would be good for Angelica. After a hard lesson, she would probably stop fooling around and getting into trouble. "Where are you taking me?" the girl asked quietly. "Don't you think that the questions here should be asked to me?" through a stern look. Angelica started to ask, but stopped talking and nodded. She lowered her gaze to her hands folded in her lap. She was just very scared. He was saying that she would be punished. Lucy would be punished. But even scarier was trying to talk to this man. Entering the city center, the car stopped at the service entrance to the Mermaid's Heart nightclub. It was the most expensive establishment of its kind in Jamaica, but it wasn't easy to get in. The main guests were foreigners and locals, but both had to first obtain a membership card, which was issued only by invitation to approved guests and required a generous entrance fee. Even from the corridor that connected the back rooms, the electronic music played in the club could be heard. None of the waiters and other staff who met along the way paid any attention to the girl in pajamas, who followed the man with her head dutifully lowered. Ethan led Angelica to the elevators and pressed the button for the 4th floor. The last 2 floors of the building were arranged as apartments for the owners of the establishment and especially important guests who needed confidential accommodation in the city. "Come in," Ethan said as Angelica lingered on the threshold of the apartment. Breathing heavily, the girl entered the huge room, the main element of which was a bed. No, I beg you." Turning to Ethan, Angelica groped for his jacket, tried to look into his eyes. "Please don't," he said something quickly. By the intonation of Camille, who spoke next, she was against it. A minute later, the closet doors opened, and for the second time in 24 hours, Angelica was dragged out of the small shelter. There was no chance of escape from the grip of this big man. Angelica looked at him with a nasty grin, wearing jeans and a leather vest that didn't fit over his fat belly. The man's arms, neck, and chest were covered in tattoos. "Asshole," spat out Camille in English. She stood beside her brother, who was sitting on the floor holding his stomach. "I'm sorry," turned to Angelica. He gave out. "What?" "Please, Enrique doesn't speak English," Camilla said. "Then translate it." Angelica begged. "I don't understand. Why would he want me? What's it got to do with me?" "My brother thought you would be good for the debt," Camille cried. "I'm sorry." "What? What's going on here?" Angelica struggled to get away, but Enrique seemed amused. Without any shame, he continued to hold her down and ran his hand over the figure from the front, then from behind. He licked his lips and growled something to his 2 gun-wielding friends. What? What does he want?" Angelica gasped in terror and panic. Your brother said you escaped from the traffickers, that you were alone. Enrique doesn't do that sort of thing, Camilla replied. But he agreed to wait on the debt, since Mark offered him such entertainment. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't know that thing was coming. Help, somebody, help. In her panic, Angelica didn't realize she'd switched to her native tongue. Enrique's fingers entwined predatorily in the girl's hair, forcing her head back. He shook the captive like a doll and shouted something. It was not necessary to know the local dialect to understand his command to be silent and not to resist. For some reason, his men laughed. I'm sorry, Camille looked away. Do what he says. Then you'll stay alive. Be obedient and he'll let you go. Then he'll let you go. Listen to me, please. Enrique knows how to break people. He's the boss. Just accept it and bear it. Angelica sobbed and squeezed her eyes shut. Enrique led her to the exit of the apartment, down the stairs to the street. His men followed step by step. The night brought the long-awaited coolness for this corner of the world, and the fresh breeze from the sea seemed to carry particles of salt settling on her lips and the sky. Angelica thought aloofly that she smelled of the sea, and that her own tears made her mouth salty. There was not a soul on the street. Were they sleeping or hiding to avoid Enrique's eyes? For some reason, it seemed to Angelica that people were watching what was happening, hiding in their apartments behind curtains and lights off. It was terribly strange, but for some reason the girl thought that Ethan, of course, is also a bastard. But with Enrique, it is impossible to agree on anything. He will not spare. Angelica realized that now she was going to be put in the car. And then, fear hit her nerves, generated a surge of adrenaline, and the girl squealed, bumping into the sidewalk with her feet. Slipper flew off her left foot. Bare feet burned on the stones. Suddenly, a car appeared from the corner at full speed, crashed into the side of Enrique's car, literally throwing it aside. There was a scraping of metal and the sound of shattered glass. The bandit leader and his men screamed and shouted, forgetting about their prey. Angelica lost her balance and fell to the sidewalk, hurting her palms on the paving stones. The shocked girl's eyes widened when she saw who stepped out of the black SUV. Ethan, roaring at the thugs he approached, ignoring the gun pointed at him. He also had a gun in his hand, but the barrel was down low for now. Angelica did not understand what they were talking about, but at some point Enrique suddenly raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture and told his men to put their weapons away. Now his voice sounded guilty, even ingratiating. Ethan walked past the gang and squatted down next to Angelica. How was the walk, little girl? Instead of answering, Angelica sniffed her nose and burst into tears. Who would have thought you'd cause so much trouble? He helped her up and led her to his car. He opened the door and Angelica obediently climbed in. She felt devastated, exhausted, broken. She just wanted to disappear, or at least not to feel, not to be afraid, not to hear, not to see anything. Don't go anywhere, okay? The man smiled and turned back to the gang. And then, coming close to Enrique, he simply punched him in the jaw with all his might. The leader groaned and sank down onto the road, but he did nothing in response. And none of his henchmen moved. They all knew they had the misfortune to accidentally hurt something that belonged to serious people. Ethan was very angry. In fact, he hadn't expected there to be any trouble with these girls. Ever since the plans had suddenly, to be more precise, for everyone but him, suddenly changed, everything had been going right. He had arranged for the goods to be moved to a safe place. It was even funny because the concept of a safe place for Ethan and those he had been working for lately were essentially absolute opposites. It was true that Angelica seemed different to him at first glance, like other girls who'd gotten into the same kind of stories, and he had seen a lot of them. Her friend Lucy, he knew all about her. Knave fool who believed in the fairy tale of a beautiful life. But Angelica made a strange and that irritated, incomprehensible impression. What to expect from her? And then suddenly this prank at the airport. The girl obviously knew why she was taken out, but this masquerade and the paper in the passport cover. What could this little girl, who only recently became an adult, be up to? The mere fact that she consciously took such a risk said that she was impossibly stupid or desperately brave. The only thing that was unclear was her motives. He was going to talk to her and find out, but she surprised again. The blow had been a good one. and now her face was adorned with a band-aid across her nose. Ethan had to stay late to take Lucy to the right place. The girl, by the way, at first worried about her friend, but then she was distracted by her own interests. Ethan told her that Angelica's luggage was found a couple of forbidden things. It was nothing serious, just seeds, but it was forbidden to bring seeds of plants to the islands, and while they would sort out that they were edible seeds and not for sowing, it would take some time. Lucy easily believed the lie. To get on the trail of the fugitive was easy, but still had to distract someone from the business partners. Ethan spent more than an hour feeding these people in advance carefully prepared information, which was far from real, and was able to go after Angelica only at night. And as it turned out, he was in time. The crying, disheveled girl looked very young and defenseless in those pajamas. Every now and then she cast frightened glances at him. Gritting his teeth, Ethan ordered himself to stop feeling sorry for her. He couldn't. It would only make things more difficult. He even tried to tell himself that what had happened would be good for Angelica. After a hard lesson, she would probably stop fooling around and getting into trouble. "Where are you taking me?" the girl asked quietly. "Don't you think that the questions here should be asked to me?" through a stern look. Angelica started to ask, but stopped talking and nodded. She lowered her gaze to her hands folded in her lap. She was just very scared. He was saying that she would be punished. Lucy would be punished. But even scarier was trying to talk to this man. Entering the city center, the car stopped at the service entrance to the Mermaid's Heart nightclub. It was the most expensive establishment of its kind in Jamaica, but it wasn't easy to get in. The main guests were foreigners and locals, but both had to first obtain a membership card, which was issued only by invitation to approved guests and required a generous entrance fee. Even from the corridor that connected the back rooms, the electronic music played in the club could be heard. None of the waiters and other staff who met along the way paid any attention to the girl in pajamas, who followed the man with her head dutifully lowered. Ethan led Angelica to the "I'm not dragging you to bed," the man said irritably. "Really?" A spark of hope made the girl's heart beat faster. "You won't punish me? And Lucy? What about her? I want to see her." "You'll see your friend, but first we'll talk," said Ethan uncompromisingly. "Now let's go." After calming down a little, Angelica obediently followed. The man led her into the bathroom, took out the first aid kit. "Give me your hands and the leg." "It's okay," Angelica said. "It almost doesn't hurt at all. You can do it yourself." Ethan squinted. "But I think it will be quicker and easier for me. Give me your hands for starters. I won't bite you." I had to agree. Angelica only yelped a couple of times, but then her palms and feet felt better when the scraped places were covered with some ointment and bandages. "Sit down," Ethan told her when the bandaging was done and they were back in the room. Still cautiously squinting at the bed, Angelica sat down on the couch by the window. Ethan sat on the opposite side of the sofa, assuming that some space between them would help her to feel more free. But what kind of freedom in her situation could she even talk about? "So tell me." "What?" the girl squeaked. She was scared again. "That's it," sighed Ethan, rubbed the bridge of his nose. The blow came out really strong. "Who are you and what kind of? Why did you take the job in the first place? When and where did you decide to run? Tell me everything and believe me. I'll understand if you're lying. There's no reason to believe me, of course. But you just know I'm the only one who can help you and your friend if you tell it like it is." Angelica nodded and spoke, but it was easier now than it had been for Camille and her brother. The language barrier didn't hold her back, and besides, she didn't think that some details weren't important. Finishing the story, she even began to think that perhaps she had said too much. In fact, why should this man know that she had no parents, that she wanted to study to be an accountant? It was completely unnecessary. Angelica did not forget to tell that she heard from the principal the name of a man and named all the girls who left the orphanage with her help. "You are brave," said Ethan, "to do that all alone. Unfortunately, I have not heard anything about a girl named Selena, but I will try to find out something." "Thank you," Angelica sighed. "Why are you doing this?" The question rolled off her tongue before she could think. Stupid question. What could such a man answer? Angelica wanted to slap herself on the cheeks for the fact that during the story, as if she had forgotten that before her is not a sympathetic savior, and the one who himself does all these terrible things. Ruthless slave trader, a monster in human form. There was something strange in Ethan's eyes, as if only a moment ago he'd been different. And now he was back to the hard, cynical man she'd known at the airport. "You mustn't say anything to your friend. I'm seriously warning you. If anyone else finds out about all this, you'll be killed. I'm not kidding. And I can't help you. Can't you just let us go?" Angelica swallowed hard. "I understand you don't want to let go, so I'll report you and then you and what you're doing to the authorities. But what if we just leave? If we just fly away and don't tell anyone?" Ethan pitched forward. Just in an instant, he was so close that Angelica felt his breath on her cheeks. His fingers touched her face, tracing her cheekbones one by one, and finally closed on her chin. "You think someone who traffics in girls would believe that?" "No," she whispered, and for some reason her heart thumped so fast, but not out of fear. In her very short life, Angelica had not had much contact with the opposite sex. There were, of course, peers, but no one she was really close to. Not a single date. Angelica didn't care if she was teased with ice. But what was happening now? It seemed to the girl that her own body was betraying her, and the fact that it was doing it to Ethan. It made Angelica feel so much burning disgust, contempt for herself. How could this be? Abruptly shaking her head so that her hair draped over her face, she pressed herself into the armrest at least a couple of centimeters away from the man. "What's going to happen to us next?" "Us?" "No," Ethan interrupted the nasty assumptions that were about to be voiced. "There were some complications. The new girls have been put on hold until things calm down. There's a couple weeks. You'll be here. You're too valuable. Luxury goods, if you ask me." "How much am I worth?" Angelica grinned bitterly. "Depends on what it's for," the man said thoughtfully, and the girl shrugged her shoulders. She didn't want to know any details. Otherwise, she would definitely lose it. And she wouldn't know how to breathe at all, to exist further without drowning in the nightmarish, inevitable anticipation of her fate. "In fact, the owner of the club wants to pay you for being a guest here," Ethan grinned. He was angry again, at himself, for giving in to the impulse to touch her. There were many women in his life. All kinds of women, passionate and shy. But the feelings that this girl, just a girl, it was unlike anything he had ever known before. And it was annoying, because it made you lose control of yourself, his thoughts and desires. Ethan realized that now, when they were almost there. Too much depended on the success of the part of the plan entrusted to him. He had no right to make a mistake. And this little girl was forcing him to feel something different from what he was supposed to feel. "What kind of payment?" Angelique asked. "For you to work, to dance." I said, "You're not dancers." "He says you'll learn from more experienced girls. Your friend, by the way, has already agreed." "What?" Angelique exclaimed. Lucy thought she was going to be a chef. "You should trust her less, no offense," the man said. "She's a good girl, perhaps, but the prospect of making money and, as she says, finding a patron is turning her head." Angelica pressed her lips together. She didn't like the rude things Ethan said about her friend, but she couldn't help but admit that he was right about something. Lucy hadn't considered this option as just honest labor from the beginning. She'd always wanted to make a good living, taking advantage of her youth and beauty. "I'll help you, and your friend. I'll risk it for you, but damn it." Rising abruptly, Ethan strode across the room and finally stopped in front of the girl, standing with his arms folded across his chest. "I'll help you," he repeated calmly, but there was a steely determination in his voice. "Don't ask questions, just listen, okay?" Angelica nodded. The meaning of what he said was mixed with the impressions of the experience, but the girl realized that she believed. She just believes what this man says. You won't ask the wolf why he changed his mind about eating you. You just accept it as a fait accompli and try to get away. "Don't go anywhere," the man said. "I'll be right back. I'll bring food and some things." Angelica nodded again. When Ethan returned a couple hours later, he found her still sitting on the couch and seemingly unchanged, but he didn't say anything. He threw a large plastic bag on the couch and placed a small paper bag on the coffee table beside it. "Eat." Angelica nodded again and timidly reached for the bag. "Damn it, did you swallow your tongue?" "Sorry," she blinked often and pulled her hand away from the bag. "I thought I'd better keep quiet." "You better be quiet and not do anything stupid," the man said coldly. "I didn't shut you up. Eat hamburgers and fries, orange juice. But if you're a vegetarian or need a gluten-free meal..." "No, thank you, I'm fine," Angelica replied, and finally, no longer embarrassed, hurriedly unwrapped the food. How hungry she was. She was ashamed of her wolfish appetite. It's indecent to want to eat in such a situation. She was distracted from devouring the food by clicking noises and looking at Ethan. She almost choked as he was checking his weapon. "Don't be afraid," he said, but that, of course, was of no use at all in the present situation. Angelica could only be a little less afraid, not more, and in general, it seemed to her that this sticky, tart taste of terror would never leave her. And even when everything was over, if, of course, everything ended safely, she would never be able to live as she had previously wished and dreamed of living freely and easily. "I have to leave. I'll be back in about 5 or 6 hours. You should get some sleep." He pointed to the bed. "The linens are clean. Clothes in a bag. There's even underwear finished as tactfully as possible." Some of the girls shared their new unworn clothes. "I hope I got the right size." "Okay, I'm leaving. If they knock, don't open the door and stay hidden." "Okay, Ethan." I called him at the door. "Thank you," exhaled, meeting the man's gaze. "Thank you for helping." He froze. He gritted his teeth and grinned wickedly. "I'm going to regret this." Angelica was not offended by the answer, and she did not want to do anything that would make him regret that he had decided to help or even change his mind. But the waiting was unbearable. The girl lay down to sleep, and when she woke up, it was dark outside the window again. Angelica woke up from a nightmare realistic, as if everything was happening in reality. In it, Selena and Lucy were crying and calling for her help. They were being dragged somewhere in the dark by cruel people whose faces could not be seen. And now Angelica could not get rid of the thought that Lucy was really in danger. Where is she? Sitting quietly in the room allotted to her? Or had that soulless man already made her dance for the amusement of the audience? Angelica forgot everything that Lucy said. Now she thought only about one thing. Her friend must have already guessed that they were not taken out for honest labor. Lucy is probably afraid. She feels bad. And that meant that she had to find her and calm her down, to tell her that everything would be all right, to share what Ethan had promised not to give an offense. Opening the bag, she feared to find some shameless evening gown, and so it was. It contained a silver-colored mini dress with thin straps, and a long-sleeved black knit cardigan, and the shoes that matched the dress were on crazy high heels. Hastily tidying herself up, the girl left the room. She closed the door. The automatic lock on the handle clicked quietly. Angelica twisted it back. There was no way to get in. Whoops. Now we have to look for not only Lucy, but Ethan as well. The girl decided not to use the elevator and went down the stairs. The stairs led to some dark corner, from which Angelica went straight to the club. Blinded, deafened for a moment while her perception adapted to the roaring music and accompanying multicolored flashes of light. How she forgot to ask where her friend was. But maybe it was around here? Or she could ask the girls working here if they had seen her. Angelica thought for the first time about who they were, these girls. Did they come to work here voluntarily? To twist like this, wriggling on the stage under hungry stares? To serve cocktails to rude guests who think that everything can be bought? Or are they prisoners too? If the former, Angelica sighed no, she could never understand how it was possible to volunteer for such a thing. Excuse me, I'm looking for a friend of mine, a waitress in a black leather mini dress. Her name's Lucy, tall, red hair. Oh, said the girl with a wide smile, lazily chewing her gum, which must have been strawberry flavored because she smelled like strawberries. She's in the VIP office. I think it's the third one. It's there. Waved her hand with such a long and sharp manicure that it was scary to imagine how she lives with such a thing. Thanking for the answer, Angelica headed in the direction indicated. Passing through the dance floor, the girl involuntarily delayed. The crowd moved sharply. There were too many people. Anna, Angelica threw off the waist of someone's insolent hands, but a moment later found herself attracted from behind to another male body. New girl? A hoarse baritone sounded above her ear. Let go. Get off. Angelica fought back indignantly. Abruptly, she pulled her hands off her hips, but she was grabbed by the waist, turned abruptly. A man about 40 years old, with a narrow strip of black mustache and goatee, in a white suit and black, with some glowing in the dark print shirt. I like bold. He grinned and tried to draw her into a dance. Angelica had promised herself to be careful, not to get into trouble, as Ethan had said. But now it was like a volcano. Smiling wickedly, the girl with all her might stepped with her heel on the stranger's foot, and when he, puzzled by the flash of pain, lost his grip on her body, rushed away. Fuck you. In the swamp. She snorted and got lost among the dancers, who did not seem to pay any attention to what had happened. Finally, after asking another waiter for directions, Angelica found the VIP rooms. In fact, there were separate small rooms, in each of which there was a soft sofa in the shape of a seashell against the wall, as well as a long counter table. But most of the space was occupied by an individual dance floor for a girl who gave the client the kind of performance he wanted to see. Angelica froze before reaching her hand to the door. What to do? Knock and say she needed to talk to Lucy. Nonsense, of course, but maybe it would be better to wait until her friend came out. My heart clenched with a bad feeling, which meant that Lucy had already been made into a dancer. What a nightmare. And naturally, they threatened her, forced her, but then the familiar, gushing laughter of her friend sounded from the office, and then Ethan's voice. Angelica, without delay, rushed inside and just opened her mouth at what she saw. A man was sitting on a sofa, some papers were scattered on the table in front of him, and Lucy was standing on the dance floor. The girl was in a red sequined outfit that looked very much like a bikini swimsuit. Her knee was neatly in front of Ethan's nose. Angelica felt a painful prick. Jealousy? How silly. And yet it was something strange and very much like her. She suddenly realized that it disgusted her to see Ethan in such close, shamelessly close company of another woman. It didn't matter if it was a friend or someone else. What was going on here? Angelica wanted to ask what was going on, but the words were stuck in her throat and she was confused. No, of course, it would be silly to expect decent behavior from someone like Ethan. But he promised he'd protect them, and now he's just a monster. He decided to have fun with a poor girl. Ethan stood up. The look on his face didn't promise anything good. I thought I told you to be quiet and keep your head down. I'm sorry, Angelica said. I just wanted to see my friend. You did so. Lucy joined the conversation. Angelica, get away. You're bothering us. Angelica looked at her friend in shock. Only now she realized that Lucy did not look like a person who had been dressed up by force. That is, almost stripped and made to dance. She looked haughty and displeased at the same time, pouted her lips, and cast strange glances at Ethan. The man rolled his eyes and turned to the dancer. Lucy, you're free. But we're not done yet. The redhead swayed her hips seductively, her slender fingers sliding along the pole. Let her go. I'll show you what I can do. I've seen enough, the man snorted out. With a hurt look on her face, Lucy got down and walked past Angelica, shoving her with her shoulder. Lucy, the girl rushed after her friend. What's going on? What's going on? And you're still asking me? Hissed the girl, turning around sharply. You're so modest and innocent, a gray mouse, and already grabbed a piece of fat. Lucy, Angelica did not recognize her friend. What's the matter with you? Don't you understand? We were not brought here to work honestly. I know. She nodded and Angelica recoiled as if she'd been hit. The owner of the club said that girls on such job offers usually come for other work. Yeah, I know. Can you believe it? And you know what? What? Angelica echoed in shock deafeningly. I'm fine with it. You think I just want to work for cents? No, I want a nice happy life, you know? I want to dress in boutiques, never go hungry. I'll make enough for an apartment in a month. Lucy, no one's gonna pay you. And even if they did, even if one of the girls got a lot, don't you realize what they're in for? What they're doing? It's unthinkable. It's disgusting. They want to use you like a thing. Yeah, look at you, you're right, the former good friend said snidely. You think I don't know what you're trying to do? She's got Ethan all to herself. Look at her. She's sneaky, isn't she? Of course, why would you give up the little things when he's the only boss around here? What? Did you show him what you can do? Did you try? How did he like it? You're experienced now. You can probably share the secret of how to make a man. Angelica didn't think about what she'd done. Just her hand flew into the air, and the next moment it whipped down on Lucy's cheek. The girl gasped and clutched her face. Her eyes filled with tears. I hate it, she shouted and rushed away. Angelica stood, barely breathing and staring at the empty place where her friend had been before. She did not immediately notice how Ethan stood next to her. I'm sorry, said and touched her shoulder. Damn you, shook off his touch, which was unbearable now. You weren't sorry when she was twirling around in front of you. That's what you're doing, isn't it? I had to go through some papers. The owner of the club said he wanted an opinion on what the new girl can do. He wants to put her dancing in 3 days. I just watched and now I can tell him that she's no good, that her choreography is disgusting. If I said no, he'd have his son evaluate the new girl. They run the club together, and he'd go beyond dancing and interview her in his own style. So, yeah, what I did was important. But what you did, Ethan was angry again. Damn it. Not only was this girl threatening to ruin his hard-won plans and strategies when she acted so rashly, forcing him to defend her beyond his original plan, but she was also annoying. Ethan was used to living in his legend, and it did not include such nuances of behavior as the need to justify himself to anyone or to repeat his orders twice. And the fact that he had to do it now, and moreover, putting the entire mission at risk of failure. It was getting on his nerves, but by sheer force of will, he managed to get himself under control again. He sent Angelica a smile of superiority, condescension, threat. I'll walk you back, baby, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to lock you up just to be sure. Angelica raised her chin stubbornly. All right, go ahead. I wouldn't expect anything else from someone like you. But one day everything will boomerang back to you. Everything you do is the law of fate. I hope so. The man growled and gently pushed the girl forward, slapping her lower back. Stomp. Don't you dare touch me. Angelica shrieked and turned around to swing again. But Ethan intercepted her arm, gently but firmly. Stop. I overreacted. I apologize. In order for you to get out of this, we have to work together, okay? Angelica wanted to say that she agreed to tolerate his unbearable company, which made her appetite disappear and goosebumps slid strangely over her body, agreed to tolerate him, but only for the sake of salvation. But she didn't have time. New faces appeared in the corridor near VIP offices, a man in a white suit, who became Angelica's unlucky partner on the dance floor, and a couple of his bodyguards. There you are, sweetie, he smiled at Angelica. I confess, no girl has ever done that to me before. But you know what? Oh no. The girl hurriedly, in the blink of an eye, literally, a jittery bunny was behind Ethan's back. I'm sorry, please. I was in a hurry and yes, I was rude. I'm sorry. And I was wondering who she was. The man continued smiling, his hands spread. And Jack tells me that she's a fly-by-night bird at his club. Which, what a pity, doesn't belong to him. But here's the thing, the smile faded and now only the eyes were laughing. Only in those eyes, as Angelica could swear by her own rapidly beating heart, there was nothing kind. They were thirsty for something dark and wrong. What I need, I take, the man continued, and turned his gaze to Ethan. I'm buying it. What? Angelica grabbed the sleeve of Ethan's jacket in an already painfully desperate gesture. The girl is not for sale, the blonde replied. At least not right now. She's good, as you, Richter, have noticed. There's an auction waiting for her, and if you wish to participate in it, well, we will be glad to see you among the bidders. I guess you misunderstood me. The man Richter called, who clearly belonged to the criminal world, was blocking the corridor with his big men. He didn't speak, but his posture and disposition demonstrated that he wouldn't let them leave so easily. I'm buying it. Give me a final probable price and I'll double it. I need the girl now. Angelica felt as if she would faint. It would be so wonderful, a saving oblivion. I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Ethan stretched lazily. The girl is already booked. Really? How interesting. Richter splashed his hands. You don't often meet this kind of birds. And who is this hunter, may I ask? We guarantee our customers' confidentiality, the blonde replied. In his intonation, there were growling, menacing notes, but his rival only grinned and lazily, as if correcting, ran his fingers through his mustache and beard. Yes, I know your sensitivity in this matter, but I repeat, I know how to get what I want. The girl is mine. I'll take care of that anonymous buyer myself, and I'll compensate you for the damage to your reputation, of course. Don't worry, Bertie. Richter's attention was now focused on Angelica. She could almost physically feel his eager gaze. Don't be afraid, he repeated, and in those words sounded a pure, unmasked threat. I'll take care of you. We'll have a lot of fun. Richter stepped forward. He had intended to just bypass Ethan. He reached out to Angelica. The girl's gaze locked onto the bracelet on Richter's arm. It was a leather black strap with many pendants, which looked strange for a man. It looked like rings, earrings, pendants, women's jewelry. And among them, Angelica noticed one of the largest. It was a silver pendant with a pinkish scarlet stone in the shape of a drop. It was the same pendant Selena wore. It was a gift from her grandmother. Selena said it was an ancient family piece of jewelry. Angelica stared at it in disbelief. The jewelry could be similar, couldn't they? Where did you get it? She asked. What? Richter raised an eyebrow, shook his hand with the bracelet. No reason. I like, things with history. A pendant with a red stone. Angelica exhaled. Where did you get it? Why do you ask, baby? Grinned Richter. But if you're interested, I'll tell you. When we are not disturbed by outsiders. Come on, let's go. We have to go. It was only because Richter had not expected any resistance, especially here on his own territory, that Ethan managed to take him by surprise. He sent the man flying into the wall with a powerful blow to the jaw, and then before they could get up, he quickly dispatched the two guards, pulling Angelica by the arm and dragging her into a side corridor behind an inconspicuous door. Ethan barely managed to exhale on the run. He stopped, turned to her, squeezed her shoulders painfully and shook her, burning her, piercing her with his gaze. Shut up. Damn you. Come with me now. Do you understand? I can't hear you. Poe, understood. Stammering, the girl replied. The corridor ended in a door. Locked. Cussing, Ethan stepped back, drew his gun, and fired several shots into the lock. Swinging the door open, they were now in the alley. This way. Angelica followed obediently. Wait, I can't stop. It was all the same, it would make her even more angry. But to run in stilettos was impossible to continue with each step. She just risked breaking her legs. Taking off her shoes, Angelica again rushed to run. After crossing the alley, they found themselves in a parking lot. It seemed to belong to a hotel. Get out of the way, Ethan shouted, pushing the parking lot attendant aside. Get in. The new order was addressed to Angelica, to whom the man was also holding out a motorcycle helmet. I don't know how to, began Angelica, confused. With a short curse, Ethan himself put the helmet on her head and roughly tightened the strap. I wouldn't trust you. You ruin everything you touch. Get in the back now. Without another word, the girl did as he commanded. She wrapped her arms around him and squeezed her eyes shut. Angelica had never ridden a motorcycle in her life, and this first experience was just awful. The vehicle wiggled, tilting dangerously, and the girl opened her eyes. Oh, she had done it in vain. The motorcycle went into the roadway. At this hour, not crowded at all, and those who met, fortunately, had time to bounce aside. But the fruit vendor was not lucky. Angelica cried out when the motorcycle at full speed crashed into the boxes with some colorful fruits, splitting them into splinters, grinding them into juicy, splashing crumbs. "We have to go back," the girl shouted, trying to block the roar of the wind and the engine. Ethan did not answer. "We have to go back for Lucy." "Ethan, stop." The girl started pounding on her back with her fist. But of course, the man did not pay any attention to such a time and force. Angelica continued to cling to him with her other hand. Finally, the motorcycle braked sharply at the guard post of a mansion. A black guard peered out of the booth and asked Ethan something in a language Angelica didn't even recognize as Spanish. He heard the answer and nodded and opened the gate. Another short burst of speed and the motorcycle stopped at the porch. Jumping off, Ethan helped Angelica off. The girl, whimpering softly, still could not undo the clasp on her helmet. "Woe is you." Ethan gritted his teeth, helped to remove the helmet, and noticed how she ashamedly pulls up her skirt, which had fallen up indecently during the ride, snidely remarked, "Who needs you? Come on." "Where are we?" the girl asked confusedly. This place looked like a respectable house of some rich people, and also an embassy, judging by the flags and some coats of arms on the walls. To Angelica's amazement, it turned out to be an embassy. True, Ethan named the country she had never heard of. "A very small island country," he explained. "Now you are safe. Be happy. And at the same time you set me up. Because of you I failed the mission." Saying all this, he stepped on her and she retreated until her back hit some bushes. The bushes were thorny and the fragrance was deafeningly fragrant from the huge rose-like flowers that covered them. Angelica stood frozen and almost breathless. She looked at the man in front of her and a storm of feelings rumbled in her heart. Disbelief that she was finally saved. A timid hope that it was really over. But how? What's going on? And then there was the resentment. For some reason, she felt sick to her stomach at how much Ethan had been rude to her lately. She didn't deserve any of it. Angelica lost her strength and covered her face with her palms and cried bitterly. She could hardly feel what was happening next. Some people came out of the embassy. She was escorted inside. Someone put a warm plate on her shoulders and brought her a glass of water. Some man who called himself a doctor asked how she was feeling. At the edge of the perception of the surrounding reality continued to be present Ethan. He was talking to an elderly, respectable gentleman in a black business suit with a narrow stripe. And then he said something and took the remote control from the TV and turned it on. On a huge half-wall screen, there was a news bulletin showing that the club was surrounded on all sides by the police. People were being let out, some of them handcuffed. Richard was among them. What is it?" Angelica asked, wiping her tears with a paper napkin. The man in the striped suit addressed her in English and explained that just now, in cooperation with the local authorities, key figures involved in international human trafficking had been arrested. They had been taken right at the airport, and local criminals who helped them had also been taken. And this club had always been considered the heart of their gatherings. Ethan stared at the screen. He was silent and somber. "I was supposed to be there. What's going on anyway?" He turned irritably to the older gentleman. "The mission is still a whole week away. What's that supposed to mean?" "There have been some changes," he replied calmly. "We did not have time to give you this information. But the mission had to be completed urgently, so as not to miss key figures. But personally, by the way, there are no claims against you." He threw a sympathetic look at Angelica. "Yes, you clearly violated the entire protocol of the mission, but you acted under the circumstances. We didn't count on the fact that our plan would include such a young person." "What are you talking about?" Angelica sniffed her nose. "What mission? I feel like I'm in a stupid action movie. What are you? Some kind of agents?" "That's right, young lady," smiled the gray-haired gentleman. "As fate would have it, it was in our little country that let's say a special organization was created, and we do that sometimes. We take part in missions in order to eradicate the evil, which, unfortunately, so much in the modern world. You wonder why I say so calmly all this to you. Well, first of all, even if you told anyone, no one would believe you. The yellow papers? Well, they write about UFOs too. Another conspiracy theory, but your testimony, young lady, can be extremely valuable to you. Ethan told me that you gave him the name of the final buyer. You know the people to whom you and your friend were to be sold. We'll need everything you know. I hope you won't refuse our cooperation. And we, in turn, will make sure to protect you while the final stage of our case takes place. You're a valuable witness, young lady. Angelica jumped. My friend stayed at the club. Don't worry, the man in charge stopped her. We've notified whoever needs to know that she's a victim. She's safe. And like you, she'll be able to go home soon. So you're not a slave trader? Angelica turned to Ethan. You were just pretending. Yes, Ethan nodded and looked away from her. Ethan is one of our best agents. For several years, he participated in missions when girls in different countries were helped to escape. But lately, he has been working, as you correctly understood, as an undercover agent. Thanks to this, we managed to gain access to a number of important documents, gather information that allowed us to organize the detention of key figures. We sometimes cooperate with the authorities of a number of countries, and so at this stage, he had to protect from the real sale, the last batch of live goods, which is you. And fortunately, he succeeded. You took that man, Richter. Angelique was visibly shaken. I saw a bracelet on his arm and a pendant on it. That's my friend Selena's pendant. She's missing. I know, the gray-haired man sighed. Ethan had already relayed your story to us. I personally verified the information. We determined that Selena was sold to Canada. No. Angelica shook her head. Have a seat, miss, the man continued. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say this. Richard is wearing that bracelet for a reason. Everything you've seen on it, it once belonged to girls, who he bought, but who refused to obey. He didn't say it directly, but the hints were enough to make the terrible truth hit, to make you repeat in your mind, no, it's not true. Soon we will have proof. Richard will probably try to make a deal with the investigation, and then we will be able to speak accurately, but I'm afraid. No, not Selena. Angelica gasped, dark circles dancing before her eyes. She had already been through a lot. She was scared for herself, very scared. But she had never imagined that it could be so painful to think that Selena, that she was no longer in the world. It wasn't true. She couldn't have died like that. She has a grandmother. Her grandmother is waiting for her. No, it's not true. It's not true. Angelica let herself go. She didn't have to be strong anymore. She cried for a very long time. She was soothed and given some tea that made her body feel better, and she also wanted to sleep. And then other events began. For the next 3 months, Angelica stayed in Jamaica. Long and tiring for her, as a witness and a victim, actions took almost all her free time. And when she was not busy, Angelica just slept or sat, staring at one point for a long time. At some point, Ethan again yelled at her and insisted that she had to start seeing a psychologist or she would sink in her condition. The girl agreed, actually, not really counting on any result. And it helped. Slowly, she was able to come to her senses. With Lucy, they hardly saw each other. No, she was fine too. They talked a couple of times. But there was no trace of the former friendship. Frankly warm. The old man, who introduced himself as Victor, told Angelica 2 months later that Naomi, the orphanage's principal, had died. An acute heart attack overtook the woman when she realized that her crimes had been solved. The girls freed from slavery by means of a mysterious and still seemed to Angelique very strange organization were going home. The press had already started to talk about what had happened, but Victor, as promised, had arranged everything so that Angelica's name would not appear in any newspaper. She knew that some things still had to deal with when she returned home, but she promised herself that she would be strong and cope with everything. Angelica was energized by the thought that the orphanage she had come from now had a new director, a man, according to reliable rumors, who was really good. Read the documents, miss, Victor said, laying out some papers in front of her. At this hour, as the sun was slowly sinking behind the horizon line into the sea, Angelica was sitting on the balcony of her room at the embassy and simply, as usual, was immersed in her thoughts. We have managed to reach an agreement. Some of the confiscated funds belonging to the top of the criminal organization are now being given as compensation to the victims. In other words, you, as well as the other girls, are entitled to some compensation. I don't want that money. Angelica shook her head. You can think about it, but if you want to hear my advice, it's better to agree. You can, by the way, if you wish, later redirect them to charity. After a few days, Angelique agreed. True, the feelings were twofold. After all, it was, in fact, dirty money. But after a few more visits to a psychologist, Angelica agreed that she was entitled to moral compensation. Finally, all the formalities were over. Angelica could go home. She had never had a real home and had bitter doubts that after what she had been through, she would ever be able to live a full life. But she also realized that she had to be strong again, no matter what. Ethan sometimes came by to tell some news, to consult on something. Angelica did not avoid him, but did not show that she was glad, because all the sparks of feeling that had previously excited her, that this man had awakened in her, it was all gone. On her last day in Jamaica, Ethan volunteered to escort Angelica to the airport. And there, when it was time for her to go to the landing, he suddenly caught her by the hand and she turned to him. I wish we had met otherwise, he said. Angelica, don't say anything, please, whispered the girl. I am grateful to you for everything, but we couldn't have been together. For you live your work. I can understand you. You're saving people, doing something very important. Only we wouldn't have been able to be happy. But I thank you for everything. He listened to every word in silence, and then he nodded, and the next moment he drew her closer to him, very close, and covered the girl's lips with his own. It was sweet, dizzying, overwhelming, and Angelica's first kiss. And when it was over, Angelica didn't want to go anywhere. More than anything, she wanted to just stay with Ethan, but she couldn't do that. And so the girl smiled at him, and then, swallowing tears, pulled away. Goodbye, she said, and turned around and hurried down the corridor to board the plane, feeling that if she delayed even a little longer, she would simply lose her way. The money she received was enough to pay for her education. Angelica decided not only to learn to be an accountant to start working, but also to enter the university, choosing a specialty from the economic sphere. It was enough to buy a 2-room apartment in the center of the city. Angelica decided that it was a good investment for the future, because one day she hoped to get married and have children. But almost the first thing she did was go to the nursing home. Selena's grandmother was in clear consciousness. Angelica could not lie to say that her granddaughter was alive, just, you see, went away and forgot her. But even the nightmarish truth could not reveal, wanting to soften at least a little blow. She said that Selena died as a result of an accident. She was not saved in time. And then Angelica offered Grandma Eugenia something. She said that it was Selena's last will. That she said she wanted Angelica to take care of the old lady. Lying was horrible, unbearable, but I had to. Grandma Kathy was happy to move out of the nursing home. After that, she even improved her health, which doctors, by the way, explain by the fact that the state of the nervous system in general is important for the body. Lucy flew out of Jamaica even earlier than Angelica. And although everything was over, everything became finally clear. The friendship was broken definitively. Only about a year after the events had ended did Angelique learn that Lucy had returned to her parents in the village, where she had gotten together with a man and was hardly working. Several times Angelique thought about what was needed: to go to her former friend, support her, to save her somehow. But then she forbade herself. She persuaded herself that Lucy herself chose how to live her life. A few years later, having already received a diploma and working as an accountant in a small firm not far from home, Angelica met a man. Harvey was practically a neighbor, lived in the house across the street. He was 4 years older than her and worked as a construction worker. After 6 months of dating and getting to know his parents, as well as, of course, with Grandma Kathy, whom Angelica now considered her family in no other way, the couple married. If there was a person who asked Angelique if she loved her husband, she would say that she did, of course, and it would not be a lie. True, it was not that love. When the head is round from the rapture dazzling, when the heart stops from excitement, it was a quiet, calm, but deep and some kind of cozy feeling. They just suddenly realized that they were good together. Harvey's family took Angelica well, but she did not dare to tell him about that part of his past, which was like a nightmare. A year later, the family had a daughter, and 3 years later, a son. In time, they bought a dacha. It seemed that life was going its way, and gradually the past began to be forgotten. No, if Angelica wished, she could recreate in her mind, as in reality, every minute of it, but she did not want to. She forbade herself to do it. Only once, when her daughter had already gone to the first grade, Victor suddenly called her. He said that he just wanted to know how things were going. The girl was surprised why this attention after so many years. Victor faltered a bit and then said he was calling to tell her some news about Ethan quitting his job as an agent. I don't want to see him. Angelica almost screamed. For some reason, she felt very scared. And what makes you think it's about you, Mrs.? Victor said, I just thought it might be important to you. In a way, probably. He left his business for his family. He got married a year ago. He had a daughter. I think he's finally happy, but I won't hide it. Sometimes I reminded him of you, and he said that you asked him to forget everything, and he accepted your decision and has no intention to change anything. Angelica closed her eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. It seemed to her that what had bound her to the past, what she had forbidden herself all these years to think about, now finally left her. Thank you for telling me, she replied. They exchanged a few more phrases, and then the conversation ended. Victor promised that they would never bother her again. Mom, who called? Daughter Galaka looked out of the kitchen, where she had been helping her mother to cook, looking through the apples brought from the market, selecting the most brown, dressed up for the pie. No one. Angelica smiled and hugged her daughter. Mom, what are you doing? The little girl frowned. Nothing, sweetie. Everything is fine. Just a speck in my eye. Let's bake a pie. Daddy and Sam will be back from the ice skating rink soon, and we got a cake ready for tea. It was so strange. But for some reason, Angelica suddenly realized that she was happy. Until she was 13 years old, Catherine did not know what it was like to live with her mom. Catherine always had only Daddy, and that's it. Mom died in childbirth. Catherine could not remember her, and in general, never suffered from her absence. Catherine knew everything about her mom. Her dad always told her. Since childhood, every time he put Catherine to bed was sure to be another series about Mom. Therefore, Catherine, despite the fact that she had never seen her mother, knew almost everything about her. Mom all the years invisibly present around, thanks to Dad. And also from Mom left a lot of photos, her clothes, jewelry. Dad carefully kept it all in the dresser, but Catherine was allowed at any time of day or night to open the dresser, go through Mom's things, try on Mom's bracelets and chains, inhale the smell of Mom's perfume from a half-empty bottle, and of course, looking at the photos. There were a lot of them. Mom as a child, Mom at school, Mom with Dad in the South, Mom in a bride's dress, Mom with a big belly. After Mom died, Dad never married again, although many kind-hearted neighbors and relatives tried very hard to encourage it. But Dad always said, I have Catherine and Catherine has me. Why do we need someone else? And Catherine was in complete agreement. They really lived well. Dad had his own business, something to do with computer programs Ekaterina did not particularly delve into. Father and daughter lived in a nice, spacious apartment in the city center, and later they had a country house where they came on weekends to relax in nature from the noise of the city. In general, they had no reason to complain about fate, especially since this fate had already taken away their most precious things, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Catherine did not need anything. Computer, tablet, phone, and other gadgets, all that should be a 13-year-old teenager she had. And in general, Dad never adhered to the principle that the child should be raised in austerity. He believed that the daughter should be pampered, as long as there is such an opportunity. It is not known how her life will develop further, so let at least now, while it is possible, Catherine gets the best of life. Of course, all vacations and vacations they spent together. Every time necessarily flew somewhere in a new country, and always traveled only the two of them. Catherine guessed that Daddy had his own personal life, but with her, 13 years old, he did not discuss it, and she didn't ask questions either. It was enough for her that he didn't bring any outsiders into their world. Catherine would have been happy if it had always been like that, but one fine, or rather, not at all fine day, everything changed. Catherine, meet Leslie and her daughter Angelica, said Daddy, entering the apartment. Catherine, hearing the lock on the door open, ran out into the hallway. Daddy had been gone for a long time and she was beginning to worry. And now, Daddy came not only very late, but also now alone. Next to him stood a tall blonde. Her lush curls lay beautifully on her shoulders and back. She was dressed in a shiny cloak. Lacquered Catherine remembered the unfamiliar word. By the hand of this blonde held a girl about Kadia's age. The girl looked at Catherine warily. Everyone sat down to drink tea. Catherine did not understand why this woman and the girl were here. She would like to spend the evening just the two of them with her father. But no one listened to her, and Daddy seemed to notice nothing around at all except this Leslie. Soon the girls were sent to play in Catherine's room. "Daughter, show Angelica your toys," said Papa without taking his eyes off Leslie. Once in the room, Catherine tried to talk to Angelica, but she was sullenly silent. Then suddenly she said, "Soon our mother and father will be married." "You're lying," shouted Catherine and cried. "No, I'm not lying," Angelica answered calmly. "I was eavesdropping." Catherine ran out of the room. There was no one in the kitchen. Ekaterina looked for her dad in the living room. Nothing. The door to the bedroom was locked from the inside. No matter how much Catherine did not knock, no one opened it. This was the first time this had happened in their house. Usually the doors were not locked. Angelica came up and, taking Catherine by the hand, almost dragged her behind her back into the room. "Why are you making such a fuss? Are you a little girl? Do not disturb people. Do not touch me," pulled out her hand Catherine. Angelica pushed her back. A fight broke out. The girls scratched and squealed, kicked and bit. The parents who came to the screams barely managed to separate Ekaterina and Angelica. The latter was immediately kicked in the ass by her mother. Catherine's father simply took her into the living room and told her to sit until he returned. Soon Catherine heard that the guests had left, and immediately her father came to her. "Well, tell me, daughter, what you did not share." He took Katina's palm in his big hand and sat next to her on the sofa. Catherine shrugged her shoulders. "These are our guests. I invited them. And you fight? What will they think of us?" "Dad, and why did they come?" "Do not call them again. I did not like them," started sobbing Catherine, preparing to cry. "What did they do to you badly?" surprised Daddy. "That Angelica is very nasty and a liar. She said that you and this aunt will get married." Dad sighed. "And even if she did, what's wrong with that?" "I don't like them." Catherine cut him off. "But you don't know them well yet," objected Father. "I'm sure if you get to know each other better, you will like each other. Do you really want to marry this one? Her name is Leslie, and we're really gonna get married. But if you say no, I'll say no. Got a kitten?" Daddy affectionately called Catherine by her family's pet name. Only he called her that. Hearing that no one will not marry anyone if Catherine is against it, the girl instantly calmed down, and Daddy continued, "Catherine, let's really try to give Leslie and Angelica a chance. You're growing up. You need your mom more and more, and a little sister wouldn't hurt. And it's getting hard for me too. I'd like to have a mistress in the house, a woman's hand. And if I don't want to. But you don't know what it's like, do you? Living with your mom, having a little sister. You just have to try it. What if I don't like it? Well, then it's not gonna work out," Dad concluded. They agreed that this coming weekend they would all go to the park together. When they met, Leslie and Angelica behaved very differently from the first time. Leslie was very nice to Catherine, and Angelica, pretending that there was no fight between them, offered friendship. It turned out that Angelica was a year older than Catherine. She and her mother came to the capital from a small southern town and have been living here for a year. Angelica promised Catherine to teach her how to weave bracelets from beads, and Catherine thought, maybe Dad was right, and this Angelica is not so bad, and it would be cool to have a little sister. They met a few more times, went to the movies, and in a cafe, and in the entertainment center, and in the water park. With Angelica, Catherine during this time never once quarreled with her, that behaved impeccably, and Leslie was favorable to Catherine. She, unlike Angelica, had long thick hair, and Leslie was happy to do Catherine different hairstyles, which suited her very well. Probably, if Mom was alive, she would also make me such beautiful hairstyles, thought Catherine. One day Daddy asked, "Well, kitten, Do you think we could be the same family as Aunt Leslie and Angelica? Probably, Catherine stretched out uncertainly. She did not want to upset her father. She already realized that he really likes Leslie. And remember what pancakes baked Aunt Leslie last time she came to visit us? And she's a great cook too. I like our dumplings too, thought Catherine. Well, give us all a chance, asked Dad. Catherine nodded. 2 years passed. Catherine tried very hard to love the new mom, tried not so much for herself as for Dad. She could see that he wanted her to, but she failed, nor could she love her new sister Angelica. No, they did not fight, did not quarrel. Catherine saw that both Leslie and Angelique were trying to be nice, and this playfulness, strained, artificiality of their feelings repulsed her. But there was nothing to complain about, and when Daddy asked how she lives, whether it does not hurt her Aunt Leslie or Angelica, Catherine always answered in the negative. You won't tell her that she doesn't like the way that Aunt Leslie looks at her, what evil eyes she has at that, or how Angelica is always trying to hurt her feelings in a sneaky way. All the more so because when Daddy and Aunt Leslie and Angelica behaved impeccably, all the time fussing with Catherine as if she were a little girl, calling her our angel and treasure, and Angelica also in addition and favorite sister. But Catherine did not believe them and did not understand why Daddy does not see their hypocrisy. Although, because outwardly everything looked decent, they seemed from the outside one friendly and loving family. Dad's company had grown in recent years, he had more business, and he was in the office from morning until almost night. Aunt Leslie was home all day. She didn't work, she was busy with the household, the children going to beauty salons and shopping. It was almost impossible to be alone with Daddy now. Aunt Leslie and Angelica were always hanging around, and Catherine, having celebrated her 15th birthday, began to consider herself too old to demand a bedtime story from her father. Sometimes, when there were rare moments in which neither Leslie nor Angelica were at home, Catherine went into the bedroom, opened the dresser, took out her mother's things and sat for a long time, cuddled up with them, face pressed into her mother's dress and looking at her happy eyes from the photograph. Father's birthday was approaching. Since morning, everyone, Leslie and Angelica and Catherine, had been in the kitchen preparing a celebratory dinner. Father had promised to come home early from work, and the whole family hurried to prepare properly. By 7, as promised, the father did not appear. Closer to 8 in the evening, Catherine just did not get off the windowsill. And although because of the snowstorm, a dense shroud that stood outside the window, nothing could not be seen, she still tried to gaze. Whether in the yard will not appear in the car, father. By the time the clock struck 9, both Leslie and Catherine had already dialed her father's number 100 times. He didn't answer. Leslie said, I'm going to go to the office. I'll see who he's hanging out with. Catherine frowned and remained silent. Leslie was already standing in the doorway, dressed in her fur coat, and was buttoning her boots when her phone came to life and rang. Her father's number popped up on the screen. Oh, really? She said irritably, taking the call. The conversation was short. After Leslie turned the phone off, she sank into a chair and said, staring at the wall, Daddy's been in an accident. He's in the hospital. His condition is critical. Catherine Leslie did not take with her, although she screamed and cried. She went alone. I came home in the morning. Angelica was asleep, and Catherine could not sleep a wink all night. She called Leslie several times and she didn't answer. When she heard the door open in the hallway, Catherine ran out in hope. She thought that Leslie was coming home with her father. But she was alone, and from her face Catherine realized the worst had happened. His 16th birthday, Catherine first celebrated without his father. And frankly speaking, she didn't want to celebrate anything. The last 6 months, since Daddy was gone, Catherine wanted only one thing, to lie under a blanket, closed from everyone, so that no one pestered with silly conversations. But Leslie, after the death of his father, as if off the chain, out of nowhere in her showed aggression and anger. Or maybe it was all in her before, just before that she carefully controlled herself. Now that her father was gone, Leslie was not shy in her expressions. For the first time, until 6 months before the inheritance, she did not stop cursing her father for not taking care of them, and now, until they have access to his accounts, she has to be poor. And she has 2 dependent children, her own daughter and the foster one she had to get custody of. Leslie was always grumbling about the guardianship too. She didn't like having to fill out a lot of paperwork. Catherine at one point even wanted to shout, "So why don't you put me in an orphanage? It would be easier for you." But 6 months later, when Leslie entered the inheritance, she came to the excellent mood. After all, as she told everyone left and right, she became the owner of her husband's business, as well as all his real estate, expensive car and funds in the accounts. It was as if Leslie had been replaced. She now did not walk, but as if danced, unable to contain her joy. Catherine was no longer a child, moreover. The death of her father made her grow up quickly, and she realized Leslie was rejoicing at the wealth that had descended upon her. Or perhaps that was her goal. A woman with a daughter, who came from the provinces to conquer the capital, finally found what she longed for so long. Catherine understood perfectly well. Now Leslie to be happy is only prevented by her, the daughter of her dead husband, from which she cannot get rid of because the rumors will go. Everyone will condemn her. And Leslie tried very hard in public to portray a grief-stricken widow and wailing about the 2 orphans left without a father. Although Catherine, being already a 16-year-old girl, neither herself, and especially Angelica, who was 17, did not consider little girls. In front of strangers, Leslie made a spectacle, but at home gradually ceased to be shy in expressions. Catherine had previously guessed that Leslie only in public so kind, but in the soul is completely different, and now fully convinced of this. All of Catherine's life turned into a nightmare, or rather in the fairy tale Cinderella, where a happy ending is simply not foreseen, because princes, as you know, there is no prince, and fairy godmother Catherine did not have. Catherine would have loved to leave home, but Leslie was her guardian, and Catherine had nowhere to go. If she ran away, she'd still be returned to Leslie. At home, it was hell. After so many years of living in the love and care her father had given Catherine, she had learned what it was like to live with people who hated you. Leslie dropped the mask of kindness and turned into the same evil stepmother, who only did nothing but burden Catherine with housework, insult, and abuse. Angelica did not lag behind her mother. Catherine did not even try to understand why. She already knew. She just interferes with them, and looked forward to her coming of age to once and for all leave the house, which had recently become her hated. Leslie and Angelica made life unbearable on a daily basis. All household duties were assigned to Catherine, and if she did not have time to do something, or simply did not obey out of a sense of protest, Leslie had the conscience to hit Catherine, and Angelica gladly helped her mother in this. Periodically with checks came some aunt from the guardianship authorities. Once Catherine tried to say that she was mistreated, but Leslie and Angelica immediately raised Catherine to laughter, made Catherine a little ungrateful liar, which only their efforts did not end up in an orphanage, and lives in his apartment, warm and fed, as it was with his father. Auntie, who did not want to deal with other people's conflicts, shamed Catherine and told her not to try to deceive her anymore, and with that she left, ticking off Leslie for good performance of guardian duties. Catherine was not even allowed to cry enough. As soon as the aunt left and Catherine threw herself down on her bed, she was dragged from it by Angelica, straight to the floor, and reminded in a snide voice about the unwashed dishes. How many times during this time Catherine mentally addressed the same question to her daddy and could not count. "Daddy, why did you marry that Megara and then leave me alone with her?" There was no answer. After that incident with the aunt from the guardianship, Ekaterina realized it is useless to ask adults. They do not care about her. No one will help her. No one will not believe a teenager. They will say that she is ungrateful and slanders Leslie. And stepmother, on the contrary, believed that she knew how, when necessary, and let a tear and add sadness in her voice, and in general, skillfully used her position as a widow and guardian of the daughter of the dead husband. Many even admired her. "Well done, Leslie, did not leave Catherine in trouble alone, takes care of the orphan." Catherine tried to be less likely to get in front of Leslie and Angelica, holed up in her room, although it did not always save. All the same, Leslie found something to pick on. She would get up, sometimes in a bad mood, and start to chase Catherine. That breakfast cooked, that cappuccino brewed, that the dishes are poorly washed, rewash. In all this irritated tone, passing into an aggressive squeal, and then shouting ultrasound. When Catherine was graduating from school, she stammered about studying at the institute, to which Leslie broke into an angry retort. What institute to you? And who will help me around the house? And you won't make it. You're too dumb for the institute. But you're just like your father. You better think about where you're going to work. Yes, why are you looking at me like that? I'm not going to feed you. Childhood is over. It's time to start earning your own food. Catherine wanted to object that Leslie herself perfectly well lives on father's money, not working anywhere, but remained silent. No good, it would not lead to anything good, an unnecessary scandal she did not want to listen to. In the evening, she decided not to share her plans for life with anyone else, sat down at the laptop, and began to study higher education institutions where she could enter. Angelica caught her doing this when she returned from her walk at 10 o'clock in the evening. Mom, look, this fool is going to the institute. Having peeked over Catherine's shoulder at what she was doing, Angelica went to complain to her mother. Soon Leslie was already yelling at Catherine. What? You do not understand from one time. No institutes, go to work. No one is going to support you. Your father's money will soon run out. I spend all my health taking care of your family, so you have to take care of me now. Get a job. Bring home a paycheck. It's the best thing you can do in this life. I could combine study and work. Tried to object Catherine, realizing the senselessness of this act. I said no, and that's it. Cut Leslie and added, and in general, until you are not 18, without my consent you will not submit any documents anywhere. Catherine was silent. Leslie was right. The websites of all the institutes she had studied today said that an underage applicant needed the consent of a parent or guardian to enter the institute. Leslie would definitely not give such consent. Her guardian, realizing that the rebellion was quelled, carried herself out of Katia's room with a satisfied look. And Angelica, leaving after her mother, as if accidentally hit Katina's laptop with her hand, and it fell from the table with a rumble, splitting into pieces. All night Catherine cried into her pillow. She was not so much sorry for the laptop as she was for the photos and videos of her father that were in it. Leslie had long ago thrown away her mom's things and photos that had once been stored in the dresser. Catherine had miraculously managed to save a couple of photos of her mom hugging her dad. All of mom's clothes were ruthlessly thrown out. Jewelry was put in a pawn shop. And now, because of Angelica, Catherine lost dear memories of her father. In the morning, as usual, she got up early. It was necessary to prepare breakfast for Leslie and Angelica. They loved to stay in bed as long as possible and never bothered to help Catherine. On the contrary, they thought breakfast was the least Catherine owed them. Remember, you worthless creature, while you waste your time sitting in school, I run my father's business for the good of our family, and Angelica is studying hard at the Institute in Economics to help me keep your father's business afloat. So at least make your breakfast on time, asshole. You're of no use to me, Leslie liked to say as she sipped her morning coffee with milk and ate it with pastries or omelettes prepared by Catherine. Catherine was far from stupid, she understood. No business Leslie does not manage, at least because of the lack of education and knowledge. Goes to his father's office once a week, just to show up there, and all the affairs run by his father's deputy, which Leslie had enough sense not to kick out, otherwise everything would really fall apart. Well, and how diligently studying Angelica, Catherine also guessed, because not once heard how Leslie scolded her daughter for poor academic performance and threatened to deprive financial support. At such times, Catherine always sighed. It is that stepmother no financial support has never provided, and lately, and in general, Catherine did not even buy clothes. She was just wearing out those things that bored Angelica. Catherine's birthday was approaching. She did not enter the institute because her stepmother did not give her consent. At the same time, she had already found a place to work. Leslie agreed with her friend that Catherine would go to her to work as a saleswoman. Leslie rejoiced. Catherine's salary would go directly into her pocket. Catherine did not participate in these discussions. However, she was not asked, just put before the fact. Immediately after she turns 18, she goes to work. But for herself, Catherine decided, nowhere she will not go. In any case, not on this job. We'll look for something else. Otherwise, she really will not have anything to live on. Leslie, on her knees, preferred not to spend. It's a wonder she didn't scold her about food. On the eve of her birthday, Catherine could not sleep for a long time. Deep past midnight, she went to the kitchen to drink water. Returning to her room, Catherine heard from the HR bedroom conversation. Apparently, her stepmother was talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, tomorrow is your 18th birthday. You think we should do something? I see. Let's at least wait until the birthday passes." And the next day immediately. The rest of the night Catherine lay, flinching at every rustle. From Leslie's long conversation, she realized one thing, that she was up to something, and Catherine to stay in the house is dangerous. "Catherine, have you completely lost your fear?" shouted Angelica, coming out in the morning into the kitchen and did not see the usual breakfast. Almost immediately, Leslie also appeared. "What's going on here? Where is this one?" she asked Angelica irritably. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe she decided to take a day off in honor of her birthday. I'm going to give her a day off." Leslie got angry and, stomping loudly, ran into Katia's room. Almost kicking open the door, Leslie flew into the nursery. It was empty. The bed was neatly made. The closet was open. All the things, at first glance, as if they were in place. But Angelica, who had come up, looked at everything carefully and realized that something was missing. She even listed to her mother which clothes were missing, and there was no backpack in the room. Neither was Catherine. "Well, what to do now?" Leslie said confusedly, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "Be happy, Mom. I couldn't even dream of such a thing." Angelica laughed. "You don't understand anything," her mother said worriedly. "You see, there are some nuances." "Oh, what nuances are there?" Angelica waved away carelessly. "It's lucky she's gone. I'm so tired of having strangers at home all the time." Leslie was about to say something, but changed her mind. Angelica, satisfied, ran back to her room, and her mother sat on the bed for a long time, thinking about something. Her face was extremely concerned. Actually, Leslie didn't plan to go to work today. It was enough that she had been there the day before. She didn't really like to waste time sitting in an office and listening to incomprehensible terms. But this morning she was in a rush to get to work like never before. To be exact, it was still morning for Leslie, but the whole office was already 2 hours old. "Billy, hey." Deputy Leslie flew into the office. "Hi, what's wrong?" He looked surprised at the unexpected guest. Billy didn't like Leslie. Neither did anyone else. She was flighty and capricious, and sometimes it was a miracle to talk her out of making unexpected decisions. Billy made no secret of the fact that he wasn't happy with Leslie's leadership, and she saw it. But Leslie, for all her ambitions, was a rather greedy person, and strangely enough, this is what saved Billy from being fired. Leslie knew very well from her husband's words that no one else could be so involved in every phase of the work but Billy. In fact, he was the only one who knew as much as his boss, now ex-boss. And Leslie didn't want to lose his income because of his own emotions, so he had to put up with Billy and pretend she was being friendly. No, nothing happened. I just thought I'd stop by and see how things were going." Leslie answered, deliberately nonchalant. "How about some coffee?" Billy was surprised, but asked the secretary to make coffee for him and Leslie. "So why are you here?" he asked, not too kindly, when they both sat down at a small table on the armchairs and took a cup of coffee, just brewed by the secretary. "No reason. I want to pay more attention to work. Or maybe you're making such a fuss because Catherine turned 18. Billy suddenly hit the mark. Leslie nervously fixed her curls and said nothing. Then, as if by the way, she said, "By the way, is she here, by any chance?" "Why would she be here?" Billy looked at her in astonishment. "No, I understand that she has the right, but the girl has never shown any interest in our business." "I see." There was disappointment in Leslie's voice. She'd expected Catherine to be here. But the nasty girl wasn't here. What a bastard. When you don't need her, she gets in the way, and when you do, you have to look for her all over town. Now that we're talking about it, Billy took a sip of coffee. She really ought to be here. You remember what her father's will says, don't you? Leslie snapped back. The girl is completely out of control, does what she wants, doesn't report to me. I can't bring her here by force. Why force her? Billy was surprised. Just tell her we're expecting her. There are some important administrative matters that need to be taken care of. We've done it without her before, and we'll do it now. Leslie cut me off. I'm still here and ready to do my job. Don't play dumb. I repeat, Catherine turned 18. If you want to continue to supervise, you need a power of attorney. You are no longer the guardian. We'll see. Leslie shook her curls and rose from her chair. She left the office feeling upset. Not only was Catherine not here, but Billy had reminded her of the most unpleasant thing of all, her ex-husband's will. Only knave Catherine had not realized that her father had left her everything. Everything. And business and real estate and car and bank accounts. And Leslie had the right to dispose of all this only as Katina's guardian. Leslie's husband left her only a bank account. True, the amount of money there was quite solid, but of course it was not very comforting to her, after she learned that except for the account she got nothing. Billy, as the person concerned, was the only one who knew the terms of the will. Otherwise, how else would Leslie take over the company? So, as Katina's guardian, she got involved in the process. In the time between now and Ketia's majority, Leslie had gotten used to the idea that she was now rich, and she wasn't going to give Catherine anything when she turned 18. Catherine doesn't know the terms of the will, does she? No. You can negotiate with the notary, and then persuade, convince, intimidate, or otherwise bend the girl under himself and get a power of attorney to continue to manage everything on a permanent basis. Only Catherine disappeared at the most inopportune moment. Formally, now Leslie has no rights to manage the business, and the girl must be found immediately. Leslie sharply spun the steering wheel of the car, redirected, and turned back. We have to go to the police, write a missing persons report. Let them search, the police or what? But at the police station, Leslie did not take the statement, even though she scandalized and screamed. They told her to wait 3 days. A person of legal age, not a child. Who knows, maybe she hung out with a friend, or with friends in Soki. So what if she didn't say anything? She doesn't have to. If Catherine knew what a commotion made at home her escape, she would have been greatly surprised. It seemed to her that the stepmother should be only glad that Catherine had freed the apartment from her presence. Of course, Catherine knew nothing of her father's will. She was a child when he died, Leslie her legal guardian. Therefore, all questions were solved with Leslie. Only Leslie had all the information. Catherine didn't even know that her father had left everything to her, his favorite daughter. Yes, she had never thought about this topic because of her young age, and well, otherwise long ago would have been upset by ignorance that her father deprived her of her inheritance. In short, Catherine had no idea that the apartment, in which she had recently become an unwanted element, belonged only to her. Leslie, and certainly Angelica, had nothing to do with her. Leslie, as Catherine's guardian, has the right to reside there, and Angelica was in the apartment for no legal reason at all. Same with her father's business. Everything was in Catherine's name, and until she came of age, Leslie, as guardian, was supposed to act in Catherine's interests, as well as managing the accounts in the tank. Any actions of Leslie with the property of her ex-husband should have been solely in the interests of Catherine as required by law and the will itself. In fact, it is clear that Leslie managed the finances as she wished. Catherine was not able to even dream of pocket money. That is why now Catherine sat in the park on the other side of the city and calculated how much money she had enough. Long ago, when her father was still alive, he often spoiled his daughter and gave her money for holidays. Take, kitten, buy yourself a blouse or a skirt. I do not know what you have now fashionable. Catherine had enough of everything, and she did not spend her father's money, but saved it. And now they came in handy. According to Katia's calculations, there was enough money to rent a place to live for the first time. In the morning, while Leslie and Lepra slept, Catherine quietly put the essentials, things, money, and her documents in a backpack and left. The reasons were many, and the conversation overheard during the night was just the last straw. And already she was going to leave home. Just the conversation pushed her. In any case, Catherine didn't want to work for free for some friend of Leslie's. She didn't want to listen to any more insults from her stepmother and Lurka. I didn't want to see all the memories of mom and dad thrown out of the apartment. Therefore, when Catherine was barely 18, she left. The first thing Catherine did was to change her SIM card. She threw the old one away so that neither Leslie nor Angelica could find it. That was why Billy, who had been excited by Leslie's morning visit, had been unable to reach Catherine, although he was eager to hear from her personally that she planned to continue to give Leslie the right to run the company. But the caller was unavailable. The subscriber was currently sitting on a bench in the public garden eating a raisin bun, drinking hot, sweet coffee, and rejoicing in his freedom. "Catherine, don't sleep. Move," habitually shouted Max, the administrator of the cafe, entering the kitchen. Catherine was just putting on a tray order for the third table. Max had a style of management to yell at his subordinates, regardless of whether they were doing a good job or not. But he did it without malice, more for tone than to offend. And now, having heard his cheerful "don't sleep, move," Catherine, deftly maneuvering between people, went out into the hall with a tray and in no time found herself in front of the right table. She worked in this cafe for a month, very quickly got into all the subtleties and nuances of the work of the waiter. So now she felt like a fish in water. Running away from home, Catherine the same day rented a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, no frills, just to have a place to sleep. Her savings are not rubber, who knows what lies ahead, it is better to save. Ekaterina was very afraid that she would not be hired anywhere because she had no experience. But in the first place where she dared to timidly ask about vacancies, she was lucky. She went for a snack at a cafe near her home, and while she was sitting there, she noticed that there were very few waitresses, only two, and they clearly could not cope. Catherine plucked up courage and approached the administrator, red-haired, freckled guy, 2 years older than her. As it turned out later, his name was Max. He immediately held an impromptu interview. Catherine satisfied him. And let's face it, the work of waitresses does not imply serious requirements for candidates. And 2 days later, Catherine already went on an internship. All she had succeeded, and could not be otherwise, because she served Leslie and Angelica for so long that she was already a ready waitress, you could say. Max even asked an hour after the start of the internship, "Are you sure you haven't worked anywhere before us?" Ekaterina shook her head negatively. That's how she stayed to work in this cafe. Ekaterina was satisfied with her work, as well as with her new life in general. Shifts she put her often, she was not mistaken. The cafe needed waitresses. Therefore, Catherine's weekends were rare, but she didn't mind at all. She had no other things to do but work, and the question of money was very acute. Winter was approaching, she needed winter clothes, and just for food somewhere had to take money. Therefore, Catherine was only happy every extra shift, although her partner sometimes whined and capricious and scolded Max for nothing, calling him an exploiter. Ekaterina, except for work and go nowhere. With girlfriends, she cut off all communication, along with the discarded SIM card. She was afraid that Leslie would find her through acquaintances or friends, so Catherine had no one to socialize with. In the cafe, she did not dare to make friends with anyone. The waitresses were all already married, some of them with children, and Catherine was simply not interesting to them, with their eternal conversations about prices in stores, goat husbands, and naughty children. But Max was genuinely interested in Catherine, and that made her a little wary. Despite the fact that Catherine was 18, she had not yet had any serious relationships. At school, she was friends with a classmate, but it was a childish sympathy, no more. Nothing like that. A couple of kisses after school, and that was it. And then when Leslie went completely off the rails, it was out of the question for Catherine to go out for a walk, to the movies, to the club. She was told to stay at home and do household chores. That's why Catherine had nowhere to get a boyfriend. Well, and now she became independent, and in addition to the pluses, the new status brought negative aspects too. For example, the advances of this Max. Catherine didn't like Max, not at all. He was insolent, with constantly wet palms and running eyes. She avoided his attention as much as she could. One time she even had to punch him in the face. She went into the back room to get something, and Max followed her, and there he tried to hit on her. Catherine was not confused and slapped him on his insolent face, and in addition a knee to the groin as she once taught her father. It worked Max for a while, so frankly and obviously Pester stopped, but greasy hints still did not stop. Catherine was afraid that he would fire her, but it did not happen, although it was not in his interest because he did not give up hope to get attention. One day, Catherine thought that Angelica was sitting in the hall. She was thrown into a fever, then into a cold, and she, as she was, together with the tray, which she did not have time to bring to the table, retreated to the kitchen. Carefully, she set the tray on the serving table and only then realized that her hands were shaking so badly that she couldn't clasp them together. Carefully peeking out of the door, Catherine took a closer look. It only seemed to her the girl was just very similar to Angelica. This incident made Catherine realize that although she had run away from home, she still had not run away from the past, and it could catch up with her at any moment. Catherine, as well as every waiter in their cafe, were assigned their tables. At many of them often sat down to eat a snack regular customers. All of them Catherine for a month managed to remember. Almost all of them she got in touch with. Many left her a good tip. With one of the regular customers, a girl of about 25 years, they even sometimes threw a couple of phrases, although Max forbade strictly forbidden to enter into conversations with visitors, not related to work. But this girl always talked to Catherine herself, and it would be impolite to keep silent in response. The girl's name was Victoria, and she worked in the neighboring building, so she often came to this cafe for lunch. After a month, she and Catherine knew a little about each other, but enough to have short conversations. Victoria knew that Catherine rented an apartment nearby, that she supported herself, that she had no relatives, and Catherine knew that Victoria worked as a lawyer and also lived nearby. Catherine sympathized with Victoria, even envied her in some ways. Catherine also wanted to get an education and do something serious, and not run all her life with trays. One day Victoria came at an unusual time just before the cafe closed. Max was very unhappy. He called Catherine aside and strictly instructed her to put the customer on the street as soon as possible, because the institution closes in 5 minutes. Catherine approached Victoria, but saw that she was sitting in tears. To kick her out of the cafe in such a state would be cruel. Catherine stood next to her, but Victoria did not even notice her. Then Catherine just left to give the girl time to calm down. Of course, she was immediately kicked by Max. He reminded her everything at once, and finished with reproaches that Catherine does not respond to the signs of attention, and tried to hit on her again. Catherine forcibly fought back. She realized that Max is a coward, and to cause serious harm is not capable, and he did not try to completely overstep the boundaries, but even his salivating kisses, with which he climbed to Catherine, caused disgust. When Catherine, having barely got rid of Max, returned to the hall, Victoria was already gone. Max, running out, immediately rejoiced, and even forgot that he wanted something from Catherine. But Catherine was upset. She saw that Victoria needed help, that she was obviously in trouble, and she didn't even have time to ask. Victoria did not appear in the cafe for several days. Catherine even began to worry, but then one day Victoria came to lunch again, as if nothing had happened, and Catherine was relieved. When she brought Victoria her order, she smiled heartily, as if to let her know that she was glad to see her in a good mood. And Victoria suddenly said, "Can I order you a coffee and you can sit and drink it with me?" "We're not supposed to have coffee during working hours," Catherine said. "But you do have a lunch break, don't you?" Victoria said reasonably, "And now it's lunchtime. After all the claims of your management I will take on myself. The desire of the client is the law." Ekaterina, after some thought, nodded and soon returned to the table with 2 large steaming cups of coffee with milk foam. Victoria's story turned out to be very typical for a girl. She had a fiancé. They rented an apartment together and planned to get married. They were saving money for the wedding. Victoria trusted her fiancé. But one day she came home at the wrong time and caught him with some strange girl. Of course, she gave the traitor a scandal and then packed her things and proudly left. At first worried, and then realized, thank you that it happened now, and not after the wedding. Only one problem now remains: the lack of housing. You cannot imagine how difficult it is now to find an apartment at a reasonable price, and that near work. All options that come across so far away. To get to the office an hour is still the most acceptable of what is available. "Would you like to stay with me?" shyly asked Catherine. "Why?" "I rent accommodation here, in the neighboring building. The apartment is a 1-room apartment, but with a huge kitchen, which has a sofa. Until you find something, you can stay with me." "Really?" Victoria was excited. "That would be great. But I have two conditions, payment in half, and you stop howling at me. Otherwise, I feel like an old lady something something. Catherine glowed and nodded. The rest of the day, she worked in a great mood and dreamed that Victoria was satisfied with the apartment. Catherine liked her new acquaintance very much. She was tired of loneliness. She needed a girlfriend, and she would pay less for the apartment. When Catherine left the cafe after the shift, Victoria was already waiting for her at the entrance with a suitcase. "Are you all ready with your things?" "Oh, I mean you," asked Catherine. "What if you don't like it?" "Don't worry, I'll like any accommodation, as long as it was in this neighborhood and without my jerk of an ex," cheerfully replied Victoria. But she really liked the apartment. Catherine was worried that Victoria would object to the kitchen and even suggested that she herself will sleep there. But the new friend only cheered up. "What are you doing? Why shouldn't I like it? It is the most Trump place in the apartment. If you want to eat at night, you don't even have to get out of bed. Just stretch out your hand." The sofa in the kitchen was really comfortable and a lot of space, so Catherine calmed down. The next evening, the girls arranged an impromptu housewarming party. When Catherine came from the cafe, Victoria had already set the table and poured wine into glasses. "What took you so long?" she asked. "Your bosses know that there is a labor code. Why do you work without a day off?" "Come on," muttered Ekaterina. "I do not mind, and the money is also not superfluous. If only this nasty Max did not pester me, I would not leave there at all 24 hours a day." Victoria moved Catherine a plate with salad and, raising her glass, said, "Well, now tell me, what happened to you? Why do you live alone? Why don't your parents support you? Why do you have to provide for yourself? Why is there no one to stand up for you in front of that ginger terrorist of yours?" Gradually, over a friendly conversation, Catherine told Victoria everything about herself. She did not interrupt and listened very attentively. And Catherine realized that she really missed it, the opportunity to share their experiences with someone who understands. When Catherine finished, Victoria summarized, "What a toad your stepmother it is, and my father should have chosen a better life partner. I'm sorry." "It's okay, I think so myself. You just haven't seen Leslie. She's clinging to Dad like a leech. I knew the minute I saw them together that there was no getting rid of her. And Dad, he just wanted us to finally have a real family, and I had my mom. I just don't get it. From what you've told me, Daddy loved you very much. So why didn't he take care of you? You ended up with nowhere to live and nothing to live on. Why did Leslie get everything? Aren't you confused? It's not supposed to be like that. You're the heiress anyway." "I don't know. Leslie said she's my guardian, so she's in charge of everything. And she said there's not much money left after Dad. But you're an adult now. You don't need a guardian anymore. Let me see if I can find out if there's anything we can do." "It's no use." Catherine waved her hand. "A year ago, I heard how Leslie reissued the apartment to herself. And why didn't you object to her? She said that she had the right, as guardian, to make any transactions. And she said some other stuff I didn't really understand. Anyway, the bottom line is, I don't own the apartment anymore. Daddy's money is gone. It's gone. It's all very strange." Victoria stretched thoughtfully. "We should look into it." "Please don't. I do not want to see or hear about them." Frightened Catherine replied. About the fact that she was afraid of Leslie also because of that conversation. Overheard at night, Catherine did not say. She didn't want to scare Victoria. She didn't want to frighten Victoria, who might change her mind about living in the apartment. Victoria looked at Catherine thoughtfully and did not answer anything. From that day on, Catherine's life changed. Now she had a friend, a person with whom she could share both joy and worries. However, Catherine did not have much joy. Her whole life was a cafe, with breaks for home sleep and rare days off. In addition, the more Catherine did not give a pass to the administrator. Realizing that on good Cadia's disposition he cannot achieve, he changed tactics. Began to trembling Catherine, clinging to the little things, punished for every trifle. On the day of the next paycheck, Catherine was surprised to see the amount, which was half the usual. On all questions, Max answered only one thing. "Bad work. Made a mistake. Customers complained about you because of your rudeness. Be thankful you only got half the bonus, and next time I'll take away 100%. Catherine realized that all this he made up on the fly. and she was very offended that she cannot prove why he is so picking on her. "Well, you're a smart girl, Catherine," Max grinned. "You know how to fix the situation. If you were not so prickly, and I would also show you more sympathy." And so that Catherine understood exactly what he was implying, Max immediately tried to grab her. Work was becoming more and more difficult. Catherine would have long ago left this cafe, but where? She did not even have time to look for something else. She worked almost every day. One day, Victoria went to the cafe for lunch as usual and became an unwitting witness to the fact that Max picks on Catherine's every move. At home, she asked, "Is it that bad? So why don't you get out of there?" "What else can I do? There are a lot of cafes and restaurants around. You will not be lost," Victoria answered confidently. Catherine nodded. Indeed, in some cafes she will definitely be taken, maybe even a better salary. Victoria's support and her confidence that everything would be fine encouraged Catherine. And on the next shift, she went into Max's office and informed him that she was quitting. Of course, he told to work for 2 weeks, and all this time did Catherine nasty things. Until one day she accidentally poured a kettle of brew on him. That's what she said to him with a nice smile. "Oh, it was an accident." Max took offense like a child and mourned to Catherine before the dismissal did not pester. And in the evening at home, Victoria suddenly asked, "Listen, and you would not want to work with us? Why do you need to run with trays? You are not stupid. Quickly learn new things. Why do you need these cups and plates? What about you?" Catherine flashed with embarrassment. She remembered that Victoria worked in a law firm, and what could Catherine be there? A secretary? A coffee maker? Probably. That's all she could do. Once again, Catherine regretted that she had never studied anywhere and promised herself that next year she would make up for it. The next day, Victoria took Catherine to an interview with the head of the department, a nice middle-aged woman, and as a result, she was hired as an assistant. Catherine couldn't believe her part. She would not be making coffee, but working with documents. But would she be able to cope? However, Victoria cheered her up. "There is nothing difficult in preparing documents for our employees. You will learn." Ekaterina had already been working at the law firm for 2 months. Her position was called paralegal. In fact, that's what she was doing. She did simple technical work for Victoria and her colleagues in her department. She printed out forms, filled out cards for clients, drew up contracts according to templates. In short, everything that did not require special knowledge of law. Victoria even once remarked to her, "Catherine, you just glow with happiness. What's wrong with you? Not in love by any chance?" "No, that you," replied Catherine, shining as if really in love. "Just I like my new life. Not long ago, running with trays in the cafe, listening to the reproaches of Max, tolerating his molestation. I could not dream that my life could be like this." "Okay," Victoria stretched out. "And about falling in love? Think about it. We have mostly unmarried guys here, and you're a good-looking girl, and how long can you be alone?" Victoria herself had already forgotten her ex-boyfriend and was dating someone else. Catherine was embarrassed and said nothing. She really wanted to fall in love. Around everyone was building relationships, running on dates, falling in love, breaking up, reconciling again. In short, everyone's personal life was boiling. The same Victoria lately was almost never at home, and the evenings disappear on dates. Catherine's life was completely quiet. What could she do if no one has not caused in her soul any response? Yes, periodically with her tried to flirt and before in a cafe and here in a law firm, which she was very surprised. She thought lawyers a priori people boring and dry. And it turned out everything is not so. They are the same as everyone else. But beyond flirting, business did not go. Catherine did not give reasons. No one has not yet caused her any emotions, the desire to meet, and just the slightest interest. She has already begun to think that she is something wrong with her, to look for reasons why she does not like anyone, as suddenly with her happened a case that turned her whole life. It was winter, the first day after the New Year's vacation. Usually Catherine and Victoria always went to work together, but Victoria flew to work on a business trip yesterday, so Catherine went to the office alone that day. On the way, she stopped at a cafe for a cappuccino. Of course, not in her former cafe. Now she had another favorite, where they brewed the world's most delicious coffee, and the administrator was a nice smiling girl. So, with a cup of coffee in one hand and a purse in the other, Catherine went up to the porch of the office building where she worked. But too late, she noticed that the porch steps were all icy. The ice was invisible because of the snow that covered the top of this ugliness. Apparently, during the long New Year's vacation, no one particularly watched the territory, and the ice on the steps now insidiously made itself known. Catherine, unsuspecting, stepped on a step, then on another, third, and then her foot went somewhere to the side. Purse flew to one side, coffee in another, and Catherine herself, slipping, fell down. Everything happened so quickly that she had no time to realize anything. Just now she was climbing the steps, inhaling the delicious smell of coffee and anticipating how now will drink it at her desk. And here she is already lying on the snow, and next to lying glass, from which on the snowdrift spreads coffee puddle. Catherine tried to get up, but almost immediately she yelped and sat back down on the snow. A sharp pain pierced her right leg near the ankle. Just as long as it's not a fracture flashed through Catherine's mind. She removed her boot from her foot and threw it down beside her, going to examine her ankle. It seemed to her that the foot was beginning to swell. "Young lady, can I help you?" Behind Catherine, there was a banging of a car door and a hurried running. A young man with a briefcase in his hand began to lift Catherine, but barely standing on her right leg, she cried out, "Oh, it hurts." Catherine did not hold back, although she was usually patient. But the pain was so strong that the cry occurred by itself. "You need to go to the emergency room. Come on, I'll take you." The young man continued to support Catherine by the waist. "You must have come here for work. Now my colleagues will go to work. They will see me anyway. I'll ask someone to help." Catherine tried to resolve the situation. This stranger was with a briefcase, also with a needle, in a good coat, not cheap shoes, and even smelled from him some expensive perfume. Well, obviously on business came. Why distract him? "It's all right, don't worry." He smiled. "I'll make it. Let's go already if you have a fracture." While Catherine crumpled and doubted whether or not to agree to go somewhere with a strange man, he, not thinking long, lifted her in his arms and carried her to the car. Catherine had to involuntarily put her arms around his neck, and in those 3 seconds, while he was carrying her, everything turned upside down inside her. She did not yet realize what had happened, but she felt that she had changed. The stranger nonchalantly put Catherine in the front seat and even buckled her up himself. Then he went back to the place of Catherine's fall, picked up her purse and shoe. "You almost lost your shoes, Cinderella." He put Catherine's things in the back seat and then sat behind the wheel and they drove off. "Let's get acquainted, shall we? I don't know how to address you," he said to Catherine after a couple minutes of driving. "My name's Harry." "Harry, what's your middle name?" Catherine asked a stupid question. She knew for herself such a peculiarity. If a person she liked, she was lost in his company and began to talk nonsense or just shut up, which was even worse. "I'm not so old, only 27, laughed the new acquaintance. "So let's just go with you and no middle names. Harry, or better yet, Harry. Well, what's your name? Although I can call in Cinderella if you want." "I'm Catherine." Embarrassed, answered the failed Cinderella. "Well, tell me, Catherine, how did you find yourself so early in the morning on the first working day of the year on that treacherous porch? More precisely, in the snowdrift. What were you doing there in the first place?" Catherine said she was on her way to work. "And where do you work?" Harry was curious. Catherine named her firm and added, "You must have been coming to us. No one opens so early except us." "I guessed," agreed interlocutor. "Well, I knew it. Broke all your plans." Catherine was upset. She was really uncomfortable that such a man because of her had to leave his important business and take her to the hospital. Although somewhere in the depths of her soul, everything in Catherine rejoiced at the fact that he was with her, and she wanted them to go to the hospital as long as possible. "The plans could wait. They're just plans, and your leg is injured. That's more important," Harry replied and changed the subject. "I guess you've been working there for a while. I know all the employees, but I've never seen you." "You guessed it," nodded Catherine. "Only 2 months. And what do you do?" Harry continued his questions. "I'm a paralegal." "Oh yeah, that's right. You're too young to be a paralegal. You could have figured it out yourself. Besides, there was an opening in one of the departments. I've been told," answered the new acquaintance. "You cannot know everything about all the firms in which you come to work. as if to justify Harry Catherine. "And that's right," he replied and added, "We're here." Harry helped Catherine to get out of the car and jumped to the entrance to the trauma center. And there he sat her on a chair in the corridor and went to find out what was wrong. Next, Catherine was examined by a doctor. Then there was an x-ray, and everywhere Harry accompanied her. She had no idea how she would have coped on her own without him. As a result, it turned out that Catherine did not have a fracture, but there is damage to the ligaments of the ankle. "This often happens when a person slips on the ice," said the doctor. She applied a bandage, prescribed treatment, and told her not to load her leg for the first time. Catherine rubbed herself. Victoria went away for a few days, as without her, because you can't even go to the store. When they got into the car, Harry asked for the address and took Catherine home. On the way they talked, he seemed to Catherine to be a man who could find common ground with anyone. At least for herself, Catherine could say that she was so comfortable with her new acquaintance, as if they knew each other for an eternity, not a couple of hours. Catherine herself did not notice how she told the new acquaintance everything about herself, and the fact that she has no relatives and the stepmother, and the circumstances under which she ran away from home, and about working at the cafe and meeting Victoria. She was surprised at herself. It usually took her a while to start trusting people, and it rarely took her to talk about herself, about her problems. Almost never. But now she felt so at ease with Harry. She felt like he understood her. He wouldn't judge her, and she could tell him anything at all, like a close person. And Harry also knew how to listen. That's why Catherine didn't notice that she had told Harry her story as if it were true. She came to her senses when her story has already reached a new job. "Oh, I'm so chatty," embarrassed Catherine muttered, realizing that all the way she was talking, and her companion was silent, and did not give a word to put in. "Talk about myself, and about myself. Probably you are not interested." "No, I'm not," Harry objected. "On the contrary, I was listening. You're so young, and you have such a dramatic history behind you that you could make a TV series. Not every adult could handle that kind of life, and you were a child." "I'm not a kid anymore." "I see." Harry smiled. Every smile he gave Catherine made her feel so warm. She felt that despite the situation, she was happy. And she wasn't even particularly worried about what would happen next or how she would cope on her own without Victoria. On the way, they stopped at a grocery supermarket and bought some food. "So you don't have to waddle on one leg to get groceries," Harry explained, returning from the store with a bag. Catherine blushed. It had been a long time since anyone had cared for her like this. Perhaps since Daddy was still alive. No, there was Victoria, of course, but Catherine was an equal, and they shared all the chores equally. And Harry showed such genuine care and attention that Catherine just melted by the minute. Catherine saw with regret that they had pulled up to the house. If it were up to her, she was ready to ride with Harry all day in the car and talk, especially since he hadn't had time to tell her anything about himself. She was the only one talking. Harry drove her all the way to her apartment, and when he left, Catherine waddled into the room as she was, without taking off her coat, and fell on the couch with a happy smile. Her leg was aching. She didn't know how she was going to get around all these days, but she felt happy. With all the traveling, the doctors, the worries, she had completely forgotten to let work know she wouldn't be coming in. "Hello, Natalie, it's Catherine." She prepared to explain herself. But the boss said, "Catherine, we already know, we were told, so if you don't worry, take all the treatment you need. And if you need help, contact us. You don't have any relatives, do you? Call, we'll send someone to get medicine or groceries, whatever you need." Catherine was pleasantly surprised. She did not even think that the boss was not lazy and studied her personal file, and in general turned out to be a sensitive person. The rest of the day Catherine spent at the TV. She sat on the sofa, stretching out her sore leg, and clicked the remote control while reading the news on the internet from her phone. But by evening, she couldn't remember any news or television program, because Harry was occupying all her thoughts. She was very sorry that she was so chatty. Now she really wanted to know something about him, but it was too late. Catherine wasn't even sure if they would ever see each other again. She thought, here I will recover, go to work, and they're already trying to find out something about him. I was a fool not to ask his name or place of work. How can I find him now? Catherine's mood immediately dropped. Besides, it only now came to her. Harry could have asked for her phone number if he wanted to, but he didn't. I guess I dreamed in vain. Who he is and who I am, we're different. I'm just an assistant with no education, and he's obviously a serious specialist. And it is unlikely that such an attractive man is lonely, most likely married or with someone dating. From these thoughts, Catherine became quite despondent. She turned off the TV, turned her back to the wall, and fell asleep in a sad mood. In the morning, Catherine was awakened by a phone call. She did not immediately realize who and where the caller. First grabbed the phone and started to turn off the alarm clock, then guessed that no alarm clock did not start she was sick. In the end, Catherine realized that it was ringing in the apartment. She waddled to the door. The clock showed 8 in the morning. At this time, no one adequate could come, only the crazy neighbor downstairs, who always thought that Catherine and Victoria flooded her, poisoned, or purposely stomped their feet to collapse the ceiling. Catherine had already prepared for another peek with the inadequate old woman, but when she opened the door, she was surprised and speechless. On the threshold stood Harry with packages in his hands. While Catherine searched for lost words, he said, "Hi, how are you doing here alone? Can I come in?" Catherine stepped aside, and the guest entered the apartment. He took off his coat and at the same time said, "Sorry for the early visit, but I will be busy all day. I will be free not earlier than 10 o'clock in the evening, but to come and make sure that you have everything well here, had to be sure." Catherine thought only about one thing, that she is now so sleepy, shaggy, in some stretched t-shirt and sportswear, stands in front of this handsome, dressed with needles, and probably looks like a complete fool and ugly. "So, did I make you angry enough to come over here?" Harry asked, seeing that Catherine was silent. She wanted to say that she would have been happy to have him here any time of day or night, but she just nodded, embarrassed to look at him and trying to tidy her hair with her hands at the same time. "It's fine. I just wasn't expecting it, and here we go." "Don't worry. I think your hair looks great. I like it." Harry smiled, and to avoid any more embarrassments like this, "Give me your phone number." "I didn't realize to write it down yesterday." While he was writing down the phone number, she finally came to her senses. "I'll make some coffee. I'll just wash up. I'll do everything myself. I don't need you to run around the kitchen with a sore leg." When Catherine came out of the bathroom in a decent shirt, with her hair combed and washed, and more confident, Harry had already made coffee for them. And to go with the coffee, he had taken fresh croissants out of the bags he had brought. Catherine was amazed again. She knows this man only the second day, and between them everything is so easy. He manages in her kitchen, as if always lived here, and she looks at this picture, as if it is all familiar, as if this is their usual morning. "Here, Catherine, come on, dig into the food." Harry slid her a plate with a delicious-smelling croissant. "Sick people should eat well. I don't have time right now. I have to run, but I'll come back tonight and check on you and what you've eaten." Hearing that he would also come in the evening, Catherine smiled uncontrollably. "You need something? You tell me, I'll bring it," he asked. Catherine shook her head. "All right, if you remember anything, call. Right, I'm on the phone." Harry left as quickly as he appeared, and Catherine all day remembered their morning conversation in detail. And no matter how she did not hide from herself, eventually admitted, yes, she likes Harry very much. She was afraid to say the word "in love" to herself, though it would have been obvious to anyone who could somehow see into Katina's thoughts. Victoria called on the video link. Catherine told her what had happened to her. "What are you doing out there without me alone? You can't even go outside." Victoria was immediately worried. "Do not worry, I have someone to help." Catherine told me about Harry. "Why do you sound so happy, and you're smiling in a new way?" Victoria asked. "Come on, tell me, who is this Harry? I wonder if you've fallen in love without me." "No, I haven't," with a happy smile objected Catherine. "He just helped me." But it was clear to Victoria. She had never seen Catherine's eyes so radiant. In the evening, as promised, Harry came to visit Catherine. Only now he brought not groceries, but a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Catherine buried her nose in it and stood like that for a long time to hide her happy smile. Until Victoria returned, and until Catherine could walk on her own, Harry continued to visit her. He took her to the hospital twice for dressings and checkups. And once he even took her out of town for some fresh air. Catherine, all day long you sit at home with this late, the light white do not see, let's go to nature. And all this time Catherine was tormented by one thought. Why does Harry care about her so much? Does he like her, or is it just a good attitude to a person in a difficult situation, who has no one else to help? As Catherine did not dare to ask, and from Harry's behavior, she could not draw any conclusions. He came to see her every day, and it was obvious that he was interested in Catherine, but he did not make any hints of rapprochement. If Catherine had not been so timid, she would have kissed him long ago, but she was inexperienced in such matters and was shy to show her sympathy for Harry openly, especially since he himself did not show any initiative. But Catherine was still glad, because they saw each other every day. And during this time she only became more attached to Harry. Soon Victoria returned, and Harry stopped coming, because Catherine no longer needed his help. That's what he told her himself. But before she could get upset, he added that if Catherine was okay with it, he would like to continue communicating with her. Of course, Catherine was not against it. Now they began to call each other, and when Catherine removed the bandage, the same day Harry picked her up, and they once again went out of town. Catherine had long ago admitted to herself she fell in love for the first time in her life, and as much as she could not even imagine, only one thing upset her. From Harry still did not come any initiative to bring them together. Soon there were new changes in Catherine's life. Victoria moved to live with the guy she was dating. At other times, Catherine would have been very upset, but now she realized that there is no bad without good. When Harry never once visited, he refused, he was busy, or something else. And Catherine realized he was just uncomfortable having someone else in the apartment. But now, the first day Victoria had moved in, Catherine had invited Harry to visit, and he'd agreed. She realized she was right. Catherine had prepared for Harry's visit very carefully because it was practically their first date. She set the table, beautifully styled her long hair, wore a new outfit, which suited her very well, and even a little makeup, although she had never used makeup before. She wanted to be irresistible tonight. She wanted Harry to see her, to be speechless, and to stop, finally, to restrain himself. After all, Catherine couldn't be wrong. She felt that he liked her. It was enough just to see his gaze, which he looked at Catherine, to hear the voice with which he spoke to her. The evening had started off just fine. Everything was just as Catherine had fantasized. Harry arrived with a large bouquet of white roses, was in a good mood all the time, joking, telling jokes, complimenting Catherine, saying that today she was especially beautiful. Catherine was waiting for something to happen. She could physically feel the air thickening between them, and she was sure Harry could feel the chemistry too. Couldn't help but feel it. But the evening was coming to an end, and nothing was happening. Catherine didn't understand what was wrong. She went over her words in her head, making sure she hadn't said anything unnecessary or repulsive, but Harry still made no attempt to get closer. Finally, Catherine decided to take matters into her own hands. Little did she know if Harry was afraid of offending her or whatever else was in his head. Catherine turned on the music and asked him to dance, although before that she wished he would do it, to ask her himself. Catherine's favorite song was playing and the man she loved was next to her. Catherine closed her eyes and laid her head on Harry's shoulder. To be completely happy right now, what she lacked right now was for him to kiss her. And she was ready to swear that she felt it. He wanted it too. But the dance went on. The music kept playing, and Harry did nothing. Moreover, at one point Catherine felt as if he even pulled away from her, as if he had decided that he had overstepped his bounds and was hugging her too tightly. Catherine never realized what happened next. Maybe desperation gave her strength, maybe resentment, or maybe it was her strong feelings for Harry that made her do it. But she suddenly, unexpectedly to herself, without any foreplay, took to kissing Harry herself. And then, frightened at her own audacity, she was about to move away from him, but he wouldn't let her. And finally, what she had wanted for so long happened. Harry himself began to kiss her. At some point, Catherine even got dizzy, and she stopped thinking about what was happening and where they were. There was only him and her. And then Harry, as if coming to his senses, pulled away from her. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that," he said in a grim tone, as if something irreparable had happened. Catherine wanted to argue that it was just a kiss, but she realized from the look on Harry's face that it was better not to say anything. "I should probably go. No offense, but it's late. I have to get up early tomorrow," he said, the first thing that came into his head. They said their goodbyes dryly and Harry left, and Catherine was left in disheveled feelings, not realizing what had happened at all. She couldn't sleep all night, replaying over and over in her head everything that had happened. She could be wrong. She could feel the passion with which he had kissed her. It couldn't have been fake. Then why had he gotten scared and left? Catherine texted Harry and saw that he had read it, but there was no reply. She lay awake until morning. Good thing it was Saturday and she didn't have to go to work. Ekaterina fell asleep only in the morning, and she had some heavy, cloudy dreams. She got up at almost noon. She looked up and there was no answer from Harry. Then she decided there was nothing to lose. She should call him. However, it wasn't that simple. Harry pretended not to understand what she was talking about. He acted as if nothing had happened, said that it was really necessary to get up early for work, and that Catherine himself made up something that is not, and refused to come to visit in the evening, referring to some important family matters. It's clear I disgusted him and he left me. I should never have kissed him. He decided that I am promiscuous, so thought Catherine, sadly sitting at the table over a long, cool cup of tea. Although in the conversation Harry promised that he would call, he never called again. Catherine spent the weekend alone and waiting for a call from Harry, which never came. And on Monday, she came to work in a depressed state. The whole office was buzzing like a beehive. Instead of sitting in their seats, the employees were huddled together and discussing something heatedly. Catherine asked Victoria what was wrong. "Our chief is finally getting married soon." "What chief? You mean Natalie?" Catherine was surprised. As far as she remembered, their boss had a husband and 3 children. What's she got to do with it? "I'm not talking about the head of the department. I'm talking about the chief." "Oh yes, you've never met him yet. We usually only get together as a group at corporate events. He's been away for a long time. He just got back into town. And you don't go to ops. I mean, really, you wouldn't know Garia." "Is that his name? Harry?" That's what Catherine said, just like Harry. "Yes, what's the big deal?" Victoria was surprised. "It's a common name, it happens." Catherine remained silent, but a bad feeling settled in her chest, did not let go. "And what does he look like, this Harry?" Catherine asked. "Gorgeous, young, handsome, everything about him." Victoria shrugged her shoulders. "In short, not our bird of flight." Catherine felt that her heart pounded so hard, as if it was about to burst out. "By the way, when will you introduce us?" suddenly asked Victoria. "All I hear from you is, Harry this, Harry that. I wish I could finally see this beautiful Harry." "I don't think that's gonna happen. I think we broke up with him," Catherine answered, almost crying. Victoria began to calm Catherine, and then suddenly remembered. "Yes, I still have pictures from last year's corporate party. They're in the chief. I'll show them to you." She opened the phone, flipped through the pages, and exclaimed, "Yes, that's right. There he is, Harry." On the phone, which Victoria held in front of Kadia's face, was a large full-screen photo of Harry. Next to it were the staff from their office. There was no doubt about it. Harry was the director of the firm where Catherine worked, and he was getting married soon. Catherine worked that day as if in a fog. She always felt that she was about to accidentally bump into Harry in the corridor, so she tried not to leave her office unnecessarily. But she couldn't shove herself off from the gossip. All the females were excitedly discussing the news. "You bet, their boss is getting married. This does not happen every day." Catherine began to remember how Harry behaved with her, and now she had it all together in her head. And his unwillingness to make any steps towards her, and why he stopped communicating so abruptly. Catherine's emotions were just bubbling up in her soul. She understood why he hid from her that he would soon get married. Well, not that she understood, but at least she saw what the reason was. But why Harry hid the fact that he was the owner of their firm, Catherine could not find an explanation. Catherine was sure that now that between them nothing will not happen and cannot be. If yesterday she had invented some exculpatory versions and secretly hoped that Harry will still return, now she realized there was no chance. The greater was her surprise when the doorbell rang late at night. She was just about to go to bed and the night call startled her. Looking through the peephole, Catherine saw Harry. She didn't open the door right away. First, she was confused. Then she wondered if she should let him in at all. It wasn't until she heard from behind the door, "Catherine, I know you're home. Open up, please. We need to talk. I still won't leave." She realized that she couldn't avoid the conversation. She held herself wary, and Harry, noticing this, said, "You can take offense at me. You have the right. In the meantime, I'll try to explain everything to you. I'll make some coffee." He went into the kitchen as if nothing had happened, or so it seemed to Catherine. When he spoke again, she realized she was wrong. Harry sounded worried. "When we met, I couldn't imagine what would happen next. I just helped a girl in trouble. I didn't realize at the time that this girl would become more than just an acquaintance. And the situation was not favorable for me to tell her about myself in detail. In short, there was no reason for me to start telling her who I was. I didn't have time for that. And then, by the end of the day, I didn't want to. I liked you, and I didn't want you to think of me as a boss. I wanted to be just a guy who liked you. I don't know. I guess I was afraid that you would treat me differently when you found out." Catherine was silent. Harry, meanwhile, poured coffee into cups and sat down across from her, continuing his monologue. "I already had a negative experience when a girl dated me for my status, money, but not for me. I didn't want to step on the same rake again. It's nice to hear that you think I'm a self-serving bitch," insultingly inserted Catherine. "And you did not think that, having learned about the deception, I do not want to communicate with you. And anyway, how were you going to hide it? Sooner or later, we would have crossed paths in the office. I thought about it. I was planning on telling you, but I had another problem. The first one was nothing compared to the first one. And at some point, they both got so intertwined and confusing that I didn't care about the first one anymore." "Yes, a bride and a wedding is a really big problem." Catherine flared up. "Compared to her that you are the boss, and hit it, and really nothing at all." "Catherine, all right, scold me. I deserve it. I should have told you everything about the job and the fiancé. But we are all clever in hindsight. Now I understand everything, and I can see where I was wrong and what I should have done and said. But even if it's too late, I still owe you an explanation." "As you wish," shrugged Catherine, slightly crooked. No matter how much she resented Harry, she still wanted to hear his story and understand why he was hiding his fiancée. Harry told her, taking his time, as if it were early evening instead of late night. "Naomi and I have been together for 6 years. Until recently, I'd been fine with it. I mean, I thought I was. Even when it turned out that she was attracted to me primarily because of my position, my own company, and my wealth. Naomi began to talk often about marriage, and although I did not plan and was not sure to the end that she is the person who is one and for life, in the end I let myself be persuaded. I thought it was time to get married anyway. To start a family, Naomi is not the worst option. So what if there is no special love? Thousands of people live like that and nothing. Now I realize I shouldn't have done it. But back then I didn't care. How is it possible without love?" Catherine was surprised. Her story to Harry struck a nerve. "I can't imagine why you should be near a person you don't love." "Well, I can't imagine it now. It didn't matter then. It's time to get married. She's not a bad girl, so why not? It seemed to me that love is more your female theme, and men have everything differently. We these sentiments about love in general do not care. And then I met you, and it turned out to be nothing like I'd imagined. I felt for the first time in my life that I wanted to take care of someone, to protect someone. And I realized what it is when you really want to be together with a person and want to spend your life with them." "But what about Naomi? Why did you break up? And this wedding?" Catherine said incredulously. The confession that sounded now was sincere. Catherine saw it in Harry's eyes. But to believe him prevented so many buts. "That's why I didn't say anything. I wanted to end one relationship before starting another." "What kept you from talking to Naomi? Explain everything?" "That's the thing. Nothing stopped me. I did. I told her the truth, that I'd met someone else. She demanded to know who it was. I did. Naomi took it very negatively. She flatly refused to break up, to move out of the apartment, and in general, organized an armistice. She'd go from pity to conscience to throwing things at me and attacking me." "Why did it get to the point where everyone at work thought you were getting married? Did you eventually get over it?" "No. It's her revenge, you could say. Me us. For what? What do you think?" Well, Naomi called my secretary at work last night, who was on friendly terms, and told her in confidence that we were getting married. Of course, the secretary immediately spread the news around the office. Naomi, of course, didn't know you didn't know who I was. But then, as they say, she got lucky. Victoria told you. How would I know that? Well, Victoria came to my office this afternoon with a scandal. She came to defend you from the scoundrel who played you and left you. Anyway, there you go. Yeah, Victoria's like that. Involuntarily smiled Catherine, imagining how small, fragile Victoria attacks the huge Harry. You're lucky to have a friend. Harry smiled back at her. Catherine fell silent again. Hearing what she had just heard from Harry had turned everything upside down. Even this afternoon, she had thought he was the last scoundrel, but now it turned out that he was even too decent, and that was why he had suffered. There was nothing to stop him from taking advantage of her feelings a long time ago, especially since that night she had taken the initiative and was not going to stop. He didn't even have to do anything to get Catherine. Just let her do something stupid, but he didn't. He wanted to end the previous relationship first before entering into a new one. He didn't have to tell Naomi what kind of girl he liked, but then again, he was honest about it, and that's why they broke up with him. Catherine's mind and soul were going through something unimaginable. She wanted to believe Harry so badly, and she was so afraid she'd get burned again. He must have realized this, because he said, getting up from the table and walking over to her, I promise, no more secrets and no more secrets. I'm sorry. Come here. Soon Catherine and Harry were already kissing, standing in the middle of the kitchen. Katia, I was given an assignment to check out a certain Leslie. It involves circumstances very similar to what you told me about yourself. Only you said you'd already checked it out and it was legit. Are you sure about that? I'm getting a different impression. Victoria and Catherine were sitting at a table in a cafe. It was lunchtime, and they had gone out to have a little chat, as they had rarely been able to meet lately. In Victoria's new relationship, everything was so good that there was no time to meet with her friends. She and her boyfriend went out together almost every night. But Catherine was not bored in the evenings. She had something to do. After all, now she was dating Harry. For real, not like before. After that conversation, in which Harry told Catherine everything as it was, all misunderstandings between them disappeared. Yes, at first it was not easy, because Naomi did not want to realize that she had lost such a promising fiancé, and in every way tried to prevent the breakup. Even when she moved out of Mish's apartment, still sometime continued to visit there and rubbed everyone's nerves, including herself. But gradually everything settled down. In the evenings, Catherine and Harry made up for lost time, went to the movies, theaters, and cafes. One day they drove past a building about which Harry said, "Here I studied. This is my institute." Catherine sighed dreamily. "I would also like to become a lawyer. I've been looking at this profession since I've been working in our firm, and I realize more and more, I also want to go and get an education." "So what's it all about?" Harry said excitedly. "I thought you didn't want to study, so I didn't ask. But if that's the case, I'll start studying with you today. We're going to get you ready for admission." That's how it turned out that to Ekaterina's evening classes added to the preparation for university, especially since there were only 6 months left, and Ekaterina was very worried about whether she would have time. Victoria's mention of her stepmother surprised Catherine. "It's so strange that you brought up Leslie. I haven't thought of her in ages, and I wouldn't remember her for the same amount of time. But the other day I thought I ran into her on the street. I was so scared I didn't want to see her. But she, if it was her at all and not just someone similar, also shook me aside like a sick person. And now you remind me of her too. Is there something going on that I need to know about?" "Not yet. I'm looking into it. My superiors have instructed me to," Victoria answered. "What is there to study?" Catherine was surprised. "That Leslie has already taken everything I had, took it all for herself. And what she couldn't, she just destroyed, like mom's and dad's things and photos." Catherine was saddened by the memories. In the evening, she asked Harry why he was gathering information about her stepmother, and heard in response this story. Recently, a man named Billy came to them for legal help. He was the deputy head of a large company, and his request was so unusual that Harry could not remember anything similar in his practice. Billy asked him to track down the owner of the company he worked for. The owner was a girl named Catherine. The company used to be owned by Catherine's father, and when he died, it turned out that a will had been made stating that the company was to go to his daughter, all of it. How? You're kidding. Catherine shrieked. Daddy's deputy is wrong. It cannot be. Leslie told me that in the will everything goes to her. Harry sighed. And you believed her? Catherine faltered, and Harry continued the story. Catherine's stepmother, Leslie, ran the company until she came of age, since she was her guardian. Billy was sure that the girl knew everything, but now it was obvious that the stepmother had hidden from Catherine that she was the sole owner of her father's business. Moreover, Billy suspects that many other things have been hidden from Catherine in the same way. Perhaps the girl did not realize that the apartment, the bank accounts, the car, and the country house had all been left by her father to his daughter. Harry paused so that Catherine could somehow comprehend what she had heard, and Catherine simply could not believe her ears. How could this be possible? It turns out that Dad's firm belonged to her, and maybe Dad's apartment and everything else. I don't get it. How could Leslie keep this from me? Shouldn't they have told me? That's a question for your guardian. When you were a child, of course, she represented you, and you might not have known. It's strange, though. You were already quite an adult, and there was only one reason Leslie could have kept such important information from you. But more on that later. So Billy thought you knew everything. Harry continued his story. When Catherine turned 18 and was given the right to dispose of her property without any guardians, Leslie's authority automatically ended. In order to continue to run the firm, Leslie now had to provide a power of attorney from Catherine. But of course, Leslie was unable to provide any document. So Billy decided to talk to Catherine in person, and was surprised to find that her phone number was blocked. She did not live at home, and in general, no one knows where the girl had gone. Leslie swore she knew nothing. Moreover, Billy got the impression that she herself was annoyed that Catherine was missing. Billy figured that Leslie would want to get Catherine to sign a general power of attorney so that everything would remain as it was, and Leslie could dispose of all of her dead husband's property instead of his rightful heir. And Billy had no doubt that Leslie would have found a way to convince, intimidate, or trick the inexperienced Catherine. But Catherine had disappeared just after coming of age, and in so doing had confused Leslie's cards. At first, Leslie managed to fool Billy, telling tales that she knew where Catherine was and would soon find her. But as time went on, nothing changed. The situation was complicated by the fact that all work threatened to stand because it was unclear who the owner, where he is, and who now has the authority to sign documents on behalf of the company. For a while, Leslie was still stalling. She assured Billy that she had filed a police report on Catherine's whereabouts, so Billy waited to see what the results would be. But after 6 months, he realized Leslie was just stalling. Perhaps she was in the meantime looking for Catherine herself. To do what? To hurt her again? He realized there wasn't a day to lose. That's why Billy went to a law firm that was recommended to him by a good friend. He asked to find Catherine, to deal with Leslie's machinations, and if it turned out that Leslie really did something illegal, to pass the information to the police, let them deal with her there. So that's it in a nutshell. I had Victoria gather information on Leslie. She was upset that she didn't double-check your story and took your word for it. She said she should have known you were too young and naive to be fooled. I was, sadly, nodded Catherine, and yet I still want to become a lawyer. Who will take me there with such naivety? For that you and will study at the Institute to be able to understand all these issues. Harry comforted Catherine. Well, now enough about sad things. Let's go to the country, to the nature. When they were already in the car, Harry asked, "Why are you so sad? You should be happy. You're a rich heiress." "I am happy," sadly nodded Catherine. "And I rejoice that I did not know about it before. I don't want you to think that I liked you because of the inheritance." "What are you saying?" smiled Catherine. "I know you just like the way I fell off the porch right in front of you." Catherine was walking home from work. It was dark, and in the alley, she thought someone was following her. She pushed the thought away, and to make it less scary to walk, she dialed Harry's number. Harry saw that Catherine was calling and picked up the phone, but there was silence. He called back, no one answered. Harry felt worried for some reason, and although he was still at work, decided to go to Katia's house to make sure that she was all right. He saw an ambulance at the neighboring house and immediately felt something wrong. When he ran up, he saw Catherine lying on the ground. The medics were leaning over her, and a crowd was already gathering around her. "What happened?" "It's my fiancée." Harry lowered himself to the ground next to the lying Catherine and, feeling spasms coming up to his throat, asked, "Is she alive?" "She's alive, but unconscious," businesslike replied the doctor. "Since the fiancé held transfer to a stretcher, go with us to the hospital." "What happened?" asked Harry, lifting Catherine in his arms and walking with her to the ambulance. "Probably some kind of robbery. Hit on the head with something." The doctor shrugged. "We've already notified the police. They'll take care of it." Lucky she was wearing a hoodie. When the investigator came to Catherine's hospital, Harry was there too. And if Catherine, when asked if she suspected anyone in the attack, answered in the negative, Harry immediately said that he had an option. He told the investigator the story about Leslie. He said that he was going to report her to the police because he had gathered enough evidence that she had fraudulently misappropriated Kadia's inheritance, reissued the real estate to herself. She sold the country house and the car. The firm didn't work out. Billy wouldn't let her do it. But Leslie's greed was unrelenting and pushed her to do something. Most likely, the attack on Catherine was an attempt to get rid of her. Leslie never gave up hope of getting her late husband's inheritance. The investigator asked a lot of questions until Catherine got a headache and had to leave. "Do you really think Leslie did it?" Catherine asked Harry. "Who else would it be? You should know how many interesting things we collected on her. By the way, she didn't just run away from her hometown to come here. It's easier to get lost in the metropolis." "What are you talking about?" Catherine was surprised. "Victoria dug up a lot on your former stepmother. Marriage with your father is not her first and not the second. And you know, each time it turned out so that her husband did not die of his own death, and Leslie ended up inheriting a nice fortune." "Are you saying that, Dad, that the accident wasn't an accident, that the car broke down for a reason?" In horror, whispered Catherine. "I did not want to say anything yet. Let the investigation is all sorted out. Victoria has already given them all the materials. And Leslie just did not calculate that her husband can make a will and not on her. I'm scared, Harry." "Everything's going to be all right now. Don't worry." Harry leaned over and kissed Catherine. "Anyway, come on, get well soon. I miss you so much." "I miss you too." "Yes, do you mind if I move your things back to my place? I don't want to let you live in that apartment anymore. The alleys are dangerous." "Is it just because of the alleys?" Catherine smiled. "Of course, because of them. Not because of love." Harry laughed. He was pleased. He'd been looking for a reason for Catherine to move in with him for a long time, and now everything had worked out, although the occasion was not a pleasant one. A week later, Catherine was discharged from the hospital. Except for a concussion of the brain, she was found nothing terrible. The investigation was active. Soon Leslie was detained. At first she denied and did not confess to anything. She talked to everyone brazenly, defiantly, and felt safe. However, the results of the search conducted at her home, as well as the information that was extracted from her phone, gave the investigation the necessary evidence. Leslie was taken into custody. As for Angelica, of course, she took the position that she knew nothing. She testified that she was not aware of her mother's affairs. She had nothing to show, although the investigator had no doubt. Angelica also did not stay out of her mother's affairs. At the same time, Victoria was engaged in restoring the rights to inheritance, as well as challenging transactions on the sale of property, which on behalf of Catherine made Leslie as her guardian. This process promised to be slow, but Victoria expressed confidence that she would succeed, and Catherine trusted her implicitly. At work, Harry and Catherine tried to hide the fact that they were in a relationship, but there was no hiding the truth, and at one point it all became known. Harry thought it was Victoria who couldn't help herself and told someone, and Catherine, who was confident in her friend, thought that the news, as usual, was spread by Harry's secretary. But as it happened, what could they do about it? Only fend off the constant questions on the subject of the wedding. At one point, Harry got so sick of answering about it that he said, "Soon we'll invite you all." Catherine, who was present at this, blushed. Previously, she and Harry did not discuss the topic of the wedding, although she, of course, dreamed about it, like any girl. That same evening, Harry said, "If you promise people, you'll have to fulfill it. Let's go ring shopping. Do you agree?" Catherine saw that he was embarrassed, so she did not begin to nag and demand a normal human proposal of marriage and heart, but simply said yes, and they went to the jewelry store. Well, and on his return, Harry still made a proposal to Catherine, as it is supposed to do, with getting on his knee, with the obligatory question, and with putting a ring on her finger. While preparations for the wedding were being made, the date set, the dress chosen, and other pleasant troubles, Leslie's trial took place. Managed to prove that she organized a car accident, which killed her ex-husband, Catherine's father, and the attack on Catherine herself was also organized by Leslie. Therefore, she got a decent sentence and went to serve her time in a colony somewhere in the Urals. Catherine cried for a long time when it turned out that his father died through no fault of his own, but because of the greed of his wife. Harry with difficulty managed to calm and comfort his bride. And when the wedding of Catherine and Harry, his parents made Catherine the best gift. They said that they would try to become a mom and dad for Catherine, which she was deprived of. Of course, no one can replace the parents, but they promised Catherine that they would give her their love and warmth as Katina's real parents would. And Catherine again cried for a long time, but already from happiness. And immediately after the wedding, Catherine waited for another pleasant event. She was enrolled in the institute. She chose a part-time department so that you can continue to work, because she did not want to sit on her husband's neck, although he is very even did not object. But the option that Harry would work, and she idle, Catherine did not even consider. She and her father did not bring up like that, and the example of idle stepmother all the time stood in front of her eyes. And after all, she, as a future lawyer, had to start gaining practical experience. Except that Catherine now worked not with Harry and in his own firm, where she finally became a full-fledged owner. Catherine consulted with her husband and acted wisely. Appointed Director Billy herself came to work at the position for beginners, to learn the whole process from the very bottom. Victoria soon got married, which Catherine was very happy about. It remains to tell how Angelica's fate turned out. No way. She quickly forgot about her mother. She was not interested in going on dates as far as the Urals. She was expelled from the institute long ago for failing grades. Angelica made an attempt to apply for a job with Catherine in the firm, but she was not allowed to go further than the threshold. The last thing that Catherine heard about Angelica is that her former half-sister works somewhere as a waitress, as Catherine herself once did. Well, any honest work is honorable, Catherine thought, and she could only wish that Angelica would not get in the way of any Max.